After a long corridor, the manager led the group to a magnificent, resplendent door. The facade was antique and imposing. The four characters for national prosperity and public peace were carved in an elaborate, flamboyant script, lending an air of solemn dignity to the lintel. This door made Peng Shang's carefully laid thoughts momentarily waver. Double doors? Are they really taking us to eat at a bathhouse? The door was pushed open. Everyone, except the manager, stood dumbstruck, including Fu Hang. It was a banquet hall exceeding 500 square meters. In the very center stood an enormous round table, large enough to seat 40 people. The centerpiece of the table was a miniature landscape with rockeries and pavilions, filled with the supposed sound of birdsong and the scent of flowers. Fu Hang even spotted a miniature waterfall cascading down the rockery. "We're eating here." Fu Hang thought he finally understood why the hotel manager had been hemming and hawing earlier. With a table this grand, the 28 cold dishes already laid out upon it seemed almost insultingly casual. "This is our largest private dining room," the hotel manager announced with a smile. But Fu Hang remained rooted at the entrance. Father Shen and Mother Shen didn't dare take a step forward. Shen Qingluan lowered her head, suppressing a laugh, while Peng Shang's face was a mask of utter bewilderment. "When we made the reservation, didn't we specify how many people?" Fu Hang's lips twitched. He felt utterly exasperated. He had noticed the 5 chairs placed before the round table. But was the 8-meter gap between each seat some kind of joke? Why did it feel like the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council were about to convene? When the hotel manager saw that Fu Hang hadn't entered the banquet hall, cold sweat beaded on his forehead. "Damn it, I miscalculated. Do you have a smaller room?" Fu Hang prompted kindly. Yes, we do. It's just. The manager shivered, then began apologizing profusely. "Something smaller will be fine. It's just a family dinner," Fu Hang said, sensing the manager's acute embarrassment and predicament. Understood. The manager nodded repeatedly. With peculiar expressions, the group followed the manager back towards the elevator. This time, however, Father and Mother Shen's gazes, as they watched Fu Hang's retreating back, were noticeably more complex. Peng Shang was still in a daze, his limited mental CPU struggling to process the situation. It wasn't until they had taken the elevator to the 2nd floor and been led by the manager into a small private room designed for 8 that things settled. After the sheer opulence of the previous room, this exquisitely decorated and cozy space suddenly appeared strikingly modest. Cold dishes were already arranged on the small round table. Though they'd only had a fleeting glimpse before, it was now starkly obvious that there was a significant difference in quality between the appetizers here and those in the Grand Hall. "My apologies, we didn't have any small rooms available on such short notice. These dishes were ordered by the previous party. I'll have someone change them immediately," the manager said, hastily beckoning a waiter to clear the table. Father and Mother Shen sat down, their expressions still strange, their eyes fixed on Fu Hang with growing suspicion. Peng Shang, however, was frowning, phone in hand, scrolling through something. As he had entered, he'd glanced at the room's name, Serene Spring Scenery. "Isn't this the one I booked?" Just as he watched the waiter remove his favorite cilantro-tossed beef brisket, a text message popped up on his phone, right below the reservation confirmation he had just been viewing. "Dear valued guest, due to unforeseen circumstances, your reserved Serene Spring Scenery room is unavailable today. We sincerely apologize for any inconvenience this may cause and would like to offer you a 5,000 yuan voucher as compensation." Peng Shang's mouth twitched. "This was a room I booked. When the goddamn hell are unforeseen circumstances?" In an instant, any notion Peng Shang had of enjoying the drama vanished. He sat down quietly, a knot of apprehension tightening in his stomach. He wasn't a complete fool. By now, he finally understood. 6th Aunt, are you setting me up? Did you find out I messed around with your niece?" He didn't dare harbor any resentment towards Father and Mother Shen for making a fool of him. They were this big shots-in-laws. He had no standing to resent them. The small room, the cozy ambience, the waiter efficiently serving a spread of rich and luxurious dishes. Despite all this, a bizarre tension simmered at the table. When Father and Mother Shen saw Peng Shang's sudden, complete change in demeanor, the penny finally dropped for them too. Their daughter's boyfriend was no ordinary man. For a moment, the atmosphere became intensely awkward. Father and Mother Shen were mortified, unsure of what to say. Shen Qingluan, however, showed no inclination to help her parents, keeping her head down and eating quietly. Fu Hang, too, acted as if he were merely having a casual meal at home, occasionally placing food on Shen Qingluan's plate, saying nothing. The most uncomfortable person by far was Peng Shang. He sat rigidly in his seat, not even daring to pick up his chopsticks. He knew he was now a player in this unfolding drama, but he had no idea what his role was or what he was supposed to do next. He worried he'd fumble his lines and displease the big shot. Just as all the dishes had been served, Mother Shen, after several attempts to compose herself, selected what she deemed the most appropriate of 4 pre-planned icebreakers. She was just about to speak when the hotel manager pushed the door open once more. Mother Shen lost her chance, offering the manager a strained, apologetic smile. She assumed he was coming to offer a toast. In the past, when dining with important guests, the owner or manager would often stop by to raise a glass. But surprisingly, the manager was empty-handed, holding no glasses or bottles. He simply walked briskly to Fu Hang's side and whispered something. Master Duan is entertaining friends upstairs. Having delivered his message softly, the manager made no further move, simply standing respectfully to one side. Old Duan, he knows I'm here. Fu Hang raised an eyebrow. When you came in earlier, his men must have seen you. They called me over to inquire. The manager stated his position clearly. Master Duan summoned me for questioning, so I came to report to you first. What are your instructions? What should I tell him? The manager understood perfectly. This man was the son-in-law of the Qin family, effectively his own boss. Regardless of who Fu Hang was dining with now, that status remained paramount. He just hoped that if the young miss of the Qin family came looking for trouble later, perhaps brandishing a wine bottle, she wouldn't make things difficult for a humble employee like himself. Tell him I was just passing through. The mere thought of old Duan irked Fu Hang. He waved his hand dismissively, sending the manager away. The manager departed respectfully, and Mother Shen's carefully prepared words were once again stuck in her throat. The manager had spoken very softly, but the private room wasn't large, and it was exceptionally quiet. She had heard everything distinctly. Master Duan? In this day and age, what kind of person was addressed as master? And Fu Hang's reaction was to simply ignore him. What exactly was Fu Hang's background? Father and Mother Shen exchanged a look, then both turned to Shen Qingluan. If Master Duan is here, shouldn't you go and say hello? Shen Qingluan knew that Duan Changfeng was one of Fu Hang's very few friends. In the 6 years they had been together, Shen Qingluan had hardly met any of Fu Hang's other friends. But this Master Duan was someone Fu Hang had formally introduced to them, even making a point of introducing him to her mother, describing him as a sworn brother with whom he shared a life-and-death bond. The sight of him just annoys me, Fu Hang muttered, pursing his lips. He picked up the small wine cup before him and downed it in one go. Shen Qingluan smiled gently. This man of hers, always like this. He clearly didn't want outsiders to interrupt their meal, yet he had to act so standoffish with his own brother. Fu Hang set down his cup, then noticed with a start that Peng Shang, seated opposite him, had also timidly set down his own cup. He had actually joined him for that drink. Amused, Fu Hang shot Peng Shang a playful glance, said nothing, then poured himself another cup and drained it. Predictably, Peng Shang hastily refilled his own cup, raised it with both hands, and downed it as well. Fu Hang sighed inwardly. I told myself, I really didn't mean to drag you into this. Mother Shen's expression grew increasingly anxious. She kept looking towards Shen Qingluan, hoping her usually sensible daughter would say something to alleviate the awkwardness. However, Shen Qingluan seemed to be sulking, not having glanced at her parents since they entered the room. But thankfully, Mother Shen, who had been keeping a close eye on her daughter, noticed that when Fu Hang's and Shen Qingluan's eyes occasionally met, they conveyed an endless, tender understanding. Her daughter had truly grown up. Why didn't you tell Mom sooner? If you told the family earlier, none of this would have happened, right? Mother Shen hesitated, turning her head to glance at Peng Shang, who sat as quietly as a potted plant. She actually felt a little guilty. Peng Shang seemed like a decent kid. The private room door was pushed open. The manager stood awkwardly at the entrance as a man with a limp walked in, smiling and holding a wine glass. Master Duan. Shen Qingluan sensibly rose and greeted him politely. When Shen Qingluan stood up, Father Shen and Mother Shen also hurriedly got to their feet. Peng Shang, on the other side, was even quicker, standing ramrod straight like a javelin. This was because the man who entered had a powerful presence. Though he limped, the ruthlessness inadvertently revealed in his eyes made one feel an unspoken danger, even without him being angry. We're all friends here. No need for formalities. Master Duan waved his hand with a smile, raising his wine glass towards Fu Hang, the only one still seated, and fumed inwardly. You brat, you knew I was upstairs and still said you were just passing by. Old Duan chuckled meaningfully. You two must have been blind to fall for you. I should smash a bottle over your head. Sneaking off to meet the parents on New Year's Day. Fortunately, after careful inquiry, he hadn't heard from the manager that Fu Wanqing was also present. You eat yours, I'll eat mine. Problem. Fu Hang rolled his eyes and shot a cold glare at this old scoundrel with ulterior motives. You think I care about you? It's the brothers upstairs. They heard you were down here, and now they can't even enjoy their drinks. Old Duan was also getting riled up. You'll meet your end because of a woman sooner or later. He didn't waste any more words and gestured towards the door. Good heavens! Only then did Father and Mother Shen notice a crowd of people standing outside. Because the private room was small, they hadn't dared to rush in all at once, instead lining up to come in and offer toasts. Mr. Fu Hillo, I'm from the Black Dragon, so... Ahem. Old Duan coughed loudly. The scar-faced man holding a wine glass flinched and swallowed hard. I'm Guomang, the head of the Black Dragon film and television base. The scar-faced man quickly corrected himself, respectfully downing his drink in one gulp. Fu Hang, however, stood up earnestly, politely clinked glasses with him, and also drained his cup. Business was business. Personal was personal. He understood why old Duan had brought these people to toast him. This was old Duan's job, and old Duan couldn't be sloppy with this job, nor could he. One by one, managers with imposing demeanors came over to offer toasts. Shen Qingluan smiled and stayed by Fu Hang's side, continuously refilling his glass. Father and Mother Shen, however, grew increasingly nervous. Although these individuals introduced themselves as heads of film bases or company directors, their appearances were too distinctive. Now, their suspicions and worries about Fu Hang intensified. Their daughter, had she found herself a gang boss? Meanwhile, Peng Shang, standing there, was completely numb. At first, he thought the other man was just some formidable rich kid. If he really wanted revenge, surely he wouldn't start a trade war with his fruit wholesale business, right? But now, Peng Shang felt like the air conditioning in the five-star hotel's private room wasn't working well. The temperature seemed to be dropping. Qingluan dear, what does your boyfriend do? Mother Shen hesitated for a long time before finally steeling herself to ask. Of course, by status, she had already accepted the term boyfriend. Why don't you tell them yourself? Shen Qingluan winked, looking at Fu Hang playfully. Truth be told, even now, she didn't understand how Fu Hang had made his fortune. Even Lana couldn't find out this detail, only knowing that Fu Hang had made a lot of money in the financial markets. I'm an actor, Fu Hang said seriously after a moment's thought. An actor? Mother Shen's eyes widened slightly. Yes, a film actor. My movie is coming out soon. Oh, what movie is it? Mother Shen chimed in with a smile, though her mind was racing, trying to recall if she'd ever heard of such an actor. Why didn't he ring a bell at all? The Crow 3. The promotion should have started these past few days. The Crow 3? Heavenly King, Lu's new movie. Father Shen was a fan of Heavenly King Lu. He had become a fan years ago because of The Crow 1, so he was somewhat aware of The Crow 3. Yes, that's the one. Fu Hang seemed very excited. Wow, that's a big production. Father Shen recalled the online buzz from recently. It seemed to have a huge budget. What role does Fu Hang play in it? Does he have scenes with Heavenly King Lu? Mother Shen suddenly sounded like a kind mother-in-law, her tone affectionate as she chatted casually with Fu Hang. The villain, the Joker, Fu Hang said with a cheerful laugh. Father Shen, who had been following news about the movie, was stunned. So that's how it is. Fu Hang played the Joker? The few promotional clips that had been released were all, overtly or covertly, pushing this villainous character, as if the entire movie was made for him. But in the revealed footage, the villain was always in heavy makeup, making it impossible to see who was playing him. So, he's a new actor? Father Shen looked skeptical. Fu Hang is also an investor in this film, Shen Qingluan added with a smile, placing a meatball on Fu Hang's plate. Father Shen had a sudden realization. Ah, a rich guy dabbling in acting. So what does Fu Hang's family do? Seeing their affectionate interaction, Mother Shen felt her mood relax. I grew up without a father, and my mom was a laid-off worker, Fu Hang replied with a smile, picking up a drink bottle to refill Shen Qingluan's glass. Mother Shen was dumbfounded. This didn't match her guess of a wealthy family at all. Fu Hang is also a composer. Qinghe, you've heard of him, right? Shen Qingluan continued to explain, tilting her head like a student who had just scored a perfect 100 on an exam. Father and Mother Shen's eyes widened instantly. That's it. They had heard those songs sold for exorbitant prices. A single song could fetch tens of millions. Mother Shun's smile grew even brighter. Across from them, Peng Shang let out a huge sigh of relief. So, he's in the entertainment industry. That's good, that's good. Public figures should be mindful of their image. But before Mother Shen could probe further, there was another knock on the private room door. This time, before the manager could announce him, a foreigner with a thick accent burst in enthusiastically. Fu, is it really you? Jack Solomon looked very excited, as warm as if he were seeing family. Old soul, what are you doing here? Fu Hang was also very surprised. Fu. Jack Solomon gripped Fu Hang's hand tightly. The emotion released in that instant like a widow who had waited for years, finally seeing her long-lost love. You've worked hard, Fu Hang said, suddenly understanding as he saw tears welling up in the other man's eyes. Jack Solomon really had been through a lot. From the day he met Fu Hang, he had been plunged into the enthusiastic hospitality of this great nation, a land of etiquette. It was an overwhelming, make-yourself-at-home experience. The first day was the Investment Promotion Bureau. The second day was the Culture and Tourism Bureau. He was drunk for 2 consecutive days. On the third day, he had hoped to rest, but then the local municipal party committee came. After 3 days of drinking, representatives from various enterprises arrived. These business representatives, unlike government officials, had an unrestrained enthusiasm that was truly irresistible. The Celestial Empire really knew how to play games. Jack Solomon lived a life of utter debauchery, oblivious to the summer when sober and the winter sun when drunk, observing the passage of seasons in a haze between intoxication and lucidity. Just when he figured he'd made the rounds with all the respectable companies around Hancheng and could finally catch a break, a delegation of officials from the neighboring province arrived, leading their own local business group. By this point, he'd already realized there was a problem, but it was also at this moment that he received news. The list he'd provided, every single person on it, was gone. The reasons for their disappearances were all chillingly plausible. Either suicide by jumping due to depression or fatal car accidents and fires. The most terrifying thing had happened. And then he knew he might have to spend his retirement in the Celestial Empire, because, aside from his closest confidants, he couldn't reach any of his subordinates. Over there, they'd all been replaced, including Solomon Company. Although it wasn't officially announced, word was that his cousin, the one with a slight limp, had been reassigned to the Asia-Pacific branch. To hell with it. Just let me drown in this gilded, hedonistic world of capital. Old Solomon wasn't staying in hotels anymore. He'd even bought a manor in the suburbs of Hancheng, apparently a former farmhouse resort called Clearwater Cottage. It was fully equipped, even boasting a mahjong room. He finally managed to make it to the Celestial Empire's Spring Festival, feeling like his alcohol-numbed body could at last get a breather. But then, the director of the Investment Promotion Bureau showed up again, surprisingly inviting him to his family banquet, the Celestial Empire's New Year's Eve dinner. Good heavens, all those aunts and female relatives. Could women in the Celestial Empire drink that much too? Just yesterday, he'd passed out drunk at the dinner table, and today, before he'd even sobered up, the director of the Culture and Tourism Bureau arrived. The standard was still high, a 5-star hotel, but when he saw the familiar faces of the corporate representatives at the table, Jack Solomon knew a new round of hospitality had officially begun with the new year. Just then, he overheard someone at the table mention that Fu Hang was downstairs. Ignoring everyone's attempts to stop him, he charged over like a madman, for no other reason than to see Fu Hang, to see Mr. Catfish. Just put me out of my misery. Mr. Nian. Hello, Mr. Solomon. Shen Qingluan stood up again, her smile as sweet as ever. Oh, CEO Shen is here too. Solomon finally noticed Shen Qingluan, but strangely, after seeing her, he exaggeratedly scanned his surroundings, as if searching for someone. Where is Ms. Katerina? Solomon asked cautiously, much of the drunkenness vanishing from his eyes. In his understanding, Shen Qingluan was number 4's person, and number 3 and number 4 didn't get along. Today is my family banquet. Lana didn't come. Shen Qingluan explained gently, emphasizing the words family banquet heavily. Jack Solomon shuddered, a myriad of thoughts flooding his mind. So, number 3 and number 4 had reconciled? The 2 catfish had joined forces? Solomon instantly calmed down. Fu, thank you so much for the arrangements you made for me. I've fallen in love with this land, and I hope to settle here in the future. I've decided that, regardless of what headquarters says, I will bring all my assets here. I also hope you can make things convenient for me. Jack Solomon looked at Fu Hang earnestly, speaking with utmost sincerity. As long as you like it. Fu Heng looked at him strangely, a hint of pity in his eyes. What on earth had old Duan's people done to scare old Solomon this badly? Fu Heng couldn't help but look up at the two middle-aged men who had followed Jack Solomon in. Meeting Fu Heng's gaze, the two men nodded politely. We will naturally do our utmost to accommodate Mr. Solomon's requests. Please rest assured, Mr. Fu. One of the middle-aged men said with an enthusiastic smile, raising his glass to Fu Heng. Fu Heng quickly refilled his glass and politely clinked glasses with him. This is Director Chun from the Hansheng Investment Promotion Bureau. A young man holding a wine bottle quickly darted from the doorway to the middle-aged man's side and whispered an introduction. Fu Heng understood. And this is Director Liu from the Hansheng Culture and Tourism Bureau. The young man hastily introduced the other. I've heard so much about you. Fu Heng quickly returned the toast to the two directors. A flash of shock crossed Father Shen's eyes. City Bureau directors? Treating Fu Heng with such deference? He was part of the system, even if only at the sub-district office level, and held a natural reverence for positions like Bureau Director. A day Solomon was helped away by the two directors, but before Mother Shun could ask anything, another queue of people from outside began to file in one by one. This time, it was corporate representatives from various companies. These representatives were extremely curious about Fu Heng. They had all benefited from the overseas plunder, and the more astute among them had already realized that Fu Heng was going to be a massive tree to seek shade under. The matter of the Qin family was already common knowledge. Unfortunately, they'd had no way to connect with him. Today, someone well-informed had learned Fu Heng was downstairs and deliberately spread the word at their dinner tables, hoping to use the chaotic situation to make themselves known to him. This group was markedly different from the earlier Big Brother contingent. These were all elites of the business world, socialites, impeccably dressed and well-spoken. And the names they announced thoroughly shocked Father and Mother Shun. Most importantly, it was the attitude these socialites showed towards Fu Heng. To say they were obsequious would not be an exaggeration. This greatly astonished Father and Mother Shun. Logically speaking, these were also capitalists. Was it necessary to act this way towards someone from the entertainment industry? Were they all Fu Heng's fans? Qingluan, that foreigner just now, was his name Solomon? Father Shun, who occasionally watched the news, quietly asked his daughter. Yes, that's Jack Solomon, the head of Solomon Group's Asia-Pacific region. Shen Qingluan gave her father a meaningful look. Qingluan, dear, why do they all call you CEO Shun? Mother Shun, however, picked up her chair and moved closer to Shen Qingluan. Shen Qingluan lowered her head in thought for a moment, then turned to glance at Fu Heng, her eyes filled with boundless affection. Do you remember that foreign woman from this morning? Shen Qingluan asked her mother. The CEO's assistant from Hengyu Group? Yes, she's actually my assistant. Fu Heng gave Hengyu to me. Shen Qingluan blinked, looking gently at her mother. For Father and Mother Shun, this meal felt utterly surreal. Peng Shang left the private room once midway. He went to the front desk to pay in advance, feeling he needed to do something to salvage the situation. But to his dismay, the front desk staff told him that Fu Heng didn't need to pay for meals here. The implication was clear. Fu Heng was a shareholder here, and a major one at that. Mr. Fu, these are the flowers you asked me to buy. This was Peng Shang's first sentence after returning to the private room with 999 meticulously prepared roses. Fu Heng was very pleased, and Shen Qingluan smiled sweetly. Exiting the hotel, Peng Shang noticed the LSLS parked next to his own million-yuan luxury car. He'd seen the car when he went to get the flowers, but now, standing beside it was a massive bald head, whose fierce gaze made Peng Shang's molars ache again. Didn't I tell you not to come? It's the new year, and I've borrowed a car. Fu Heng was somewhat surprised to see Baldy Long. Baldy Long didn't speak, merely opening the car door for Fu Heng and thoughtfully taking the car keys from his hand. Without any apparent signal from him, a subordinate in a suit and tie trotted over and respectfully took the keys to the borrowed car. Fu Heng's mouth twitched. In any group of three, there is one who could be my teacher. He felt there were some things he needed to learn from Long Outyin. Mr. Fu, Mrs. Fu, Uncle, Auntie, I'll be heading off now. Thank you for your wonderful hospitality. Peng Shang bowed respectfully to them, and then quickly slipped into his million-dollar luxury car. Before they could react, the luxury car carefully drove out of the parking lot. Fu Heng struggled to suppress a laugh. Shen Qingluan shot Fu Heng a smoldering look, while her parents lowered their heads in embarrassment. You take Qingluan and her parents home first. Fu Heng gestured to the bald man. Aren't you coming with us? Shen Qingluan asked suspiciously. I had a bit too much to drink earlier. I'll walk a bit to sober up. Fu Hang dotingly tucked a strand of long hair hanging on Shen Qingluan's forehead behind her ear. Should I stay with you? Shen Qingluan lowered her head shyly, while her parents simultaneously turned their heads to earnestly admire the landscaping of the five-star hotel's parking lot. You should accompany your parents today. They've come all this way, and they probably have a lot of questions for you. Fu Hang blinked. Shen Qingluan's eyes curved into crescents. She tiptoed and planted a kiss on Fu Hang's jawline, then shyly ducked into the car. Take care, Uncle, Auntie. Fu Hang waved with a smile. After Shen Qingluan's parents got into the car, they also waved back vigorously. As the car moved, Shen Qingluan's parents cautiously examined the interior of a luxury car, appearing unusually reserved, far from the ease and comfort they had felt in Peng Shan's luxury car when they first arrived in Hanqing. People are like that, instinctively drawn to those powerful individuals within their reach, but instinctively reverent towards those who are beyond their comprehension. Similarly, people only envy or resent those who are slightly better off than themselves. For those on a level so high it's beyond their line of sight, they don't even develop feelings of jealousy or envy. They can't bear to see their brother suffer, but they can bear even less to see their brother driving a Land Rover. But if one day that brother comes back flying a plane, they would feel honored and tell everyone they meet, "That's my brother." Take, for example, the many people online who resent the rich. They always have harsh words for capitalists or billionaires, expressing disdain or ridicule. But for that plain-looking man who was incredibly popular a few years ago, how many people jokingly called him Papa Ma? What Fu Hang had shown today far exceeded Shen Qingluan's parents' understanding, which actually left them feeling quite adrift. The foreign woman driving the sports car this morning had made them afraid to look directly at her, but in the blink of an eye, they were told she was their daughter's assistant. No one in the car spoke for the entire journey until they returned to their residential complex, where the security guard naturally let them through without question. Back in apartment 609, before the door even closed, Shen Qingluan's mother eagerly grabbed her hand. Qingluan, is he reliable? Her mother's eyes shone with a dazzling light. His name is Fu Hang. Don't you have any impression of him at all? Shen Qingluan looked at them playfully. Fu Hang. Her mother frowned suspiciously. Is he your university classmate? Her father's eyes widened suddenly. He had extracted a fragment from his hazy memory. It was on a New Year's Eve many years ago. Shen Qingluan's phone rang. She was helping in the kitchen, so her father saw it was a man's name and answered it. The person on the other end was very nervous. It was clear from his tone that it was a greeting with ulterior motives. Because of that call, her parents had thoroughly interrogated her at the dinner table. Yes, he pursued me for 6 years. A smile played on Shen Qingluan's lips as she looked at her mother. Her mother's eyes brightened even more, like two 10,000 lumen LED bulbs. What do you mean he gave you Hingyu Group? Her father, relatively calmer, asked curiously. 49% of Hengyu's shares. Shares? Her mother's voice shot up. Initially, she had thought Fu Hang had given their daughter a nominal position, but it turned out to be shares? 49%? How much money was that? Around 5 billion. It's a bit difficult to cash out directly, but if you mortgage it at a bank, you should be able to get that amount. Seeing her mother's reaction, Shen Qingluan suddenly felt a flicker of inexplicable disgust. Qingluan, you have to seize this opportunity. Her mother, oblivious to her daughter's subtle change, gripped Shen Qingluan's hand tightly, so hard that her knuckles turned white. Seize what? Having a baby, of course. Only after you have a child will this matter truly be settled. Her mother shook Shen Qingluan's hand excitedly. He has many women, Shen Qingluan said calmly after a moment of contemplation. Upon hearing this, her father's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. Then you need to hurry up and have a child even more. Only with a child will your position be secure. Her mother shook her hand even more vigorously. I know. Shen Qingluan gently pulled her hand away from her mother's grasp and slowly turned to enter the bathroom. Closing the door behind her, Shen Qingluan silently looked at herself in the mirror. She suddenly felt very weary. When Fu Hang was a poor boy, you acted as if even looking at him would bring bad luck, just like before dinner. Now that you know Fu Hang is rich, you can't wait for me to become his mistress. The ridiculous thing was before Fu Hang came today, right there on the living room sofa, my parents were relentlessly trying to persuade me that Peng Shan was an honest man and marrying him would lead to a stable life. And they claimed they only wanted her to live a peaceful and stable life. Shen Qingluan lowered the toilet lid and sat down on it numbly. And what about herself? If Fu Hang were still that food delivery guy and game booster, would she fight other women for him? Fu Hang was genuinely good to her, truly good. Setting aside the reasons she still hadn't delved into, she couldn't think of any other man who would treat her so consistently, day in and day out, for 6 years. Even if there was someone richer than Fu Hang, would he treat her like this? Let alone someone richer, even a man with nothing, with only love as eyes. Could he do what Fu Hang did? A child, Shen Qingluan suddenly caressed her firm, flat stomach, tilting her head and staring blankly at her reflection in the mirror. Her dazed gaze became blurry as her pupils dilated. She didn't deliberately focus, just stared at herself vacantly. In terms of looks, she was confident she wouldn't lose to anyone. She was in her prime, full of charm and allure. A child? You're preparing for pregnancy, right? Then let's see whose womb proves more fruitful. Shen Qingluan's scattered gaze suddenly sharpened, fixing intently on her reflection. Her usually gentle and captivating peach blossom eyes now glinted with a chilling light. Had Fu Hang drunk too much? Impossible. 10 or 20 people toasting him with small cups. How much would that add up to? He didn't even feel the need to pee. The reason he chose to walk was simply to avoid Shen Qingluan, because while waiting for the elevator, he had received a text message. Happy New Year. Just 4 words, an extremely simple greeting. But this message was from his top-ranking Big Sister fan, Lee Wei Yang, who had been out of contact for a long time. Fu Hang felt he needed to take this seriously. In the elevator, he had flipped his phone over and quickly blind-typed a reply, Happy New Year. But now he was squatting in the green belt opposite the hotel, silently composing a longer message. However, after staring at the words and mulling them over repeatedly, he shook his head and deleted everything he had written. He still hadn't figured out why this love-struck brain had suddenly disappeared again. She had originally been the easiest of all his clients to handle. But after her affection level broke 90% and entered the second stage, she had become completely unpredictable. Thinking of this, Fu Hang couldn't help but think of Shen Qingluan. She was also in the second stage, and lately it seemed very difficult to guess her thoughts too. Could it be that upon entering the second stage, clients also break their seals and enter a Phase 2 form? Taking a deep breath, Fu Hang cleared his throat, pressed, and held the voice message button in the chat, and sent a 60-second voice message. Without you, the world is hard to navigate. I'm trapped in place, letting memories congeal. In the dark night, I pray for dawn to come quickly. Only you give me the warm morning light. Reaching the end of longing, I finally believe, in a world without you, love cannot be given. Sorrow repeatedly entangles me. I cannot escape. There's a voice in my heart, always calling out. Fu Hang, instead of just speaking, sang a cappella for his 60-second voice message. Lately, he'd been on the receiving end of unexpected, direct attacks. He wanted to try it himself, the effect of going all out at the slightest provocation. When dealing with a love-struck mind, a few heartfelt song lyrics were far more captivating than a 1,000-word essay. As expected, after sending the message, the long unseen typing indicator appeared on the chat interface. However, this typing indicator only lasted for 2 seconds before disappearing again. A smile tugged at the corner of Fu Hang's lips. He lit a cigarette and waited silently. About 5 minutes later, Fu Hang was sure she had listened to it at least 3 times. The typing indicator popped up again. What are you calling for? Still just 4 words. Fu Hang's eyes were deep. He took a long drag from his cigarette and slowly exhaled. Then, he cleared his throat, pressed and held the record button, and sent another 30-second voice message. Come back soon. I can't bear this alone. Come back soon. Life is wonderful because of you. Come back soon. Bring my longing back with you. Don't let my heart be as empty as the sea. Fu Hang sang these lines with such raw, overwhelming emotion. It was as intense as the day he'd caused that explosive scene at the hospital. After successfully sending it, Fu Hang couldn't resist listening to it himself. On the other end, there was a noticeably longer pause this time. Wait for me. After a long while, 2 words came from the other side. When you turn around, I'll always be there. Fu Hang replied instantly. This time just 1 syllable. Fu Hang stared at the word for a long time. Then a faint smile touched his lips. He didn't ask Lee Wei Yang why she had disappeared, nor did he press her on when she would return. Seeing wait for me, and he knew she wouldn't be gone for long. Fu Hang stared at the word for a long time. Then a faint smile touched his lips. He didn't ask Lee Wei Yang why she had disappeared, nor did he press her on when she would return. Seeing wait for me, and he knew she wouldn't be gone for long. Fu Hang got up from the ground, pondered for a moment, then turned and walked towards a distant plaza. There was a coffee shop there. He needed to go take a picture. He had the auditory emotional appeal. Now he needed a visual emotional impact to deliver the finishing blow. And in the children's play area of this very plaza, Qin Yuchu was squatting, a wide smile on her face as she watched Nan Nan sitting on a rocking horse. So adorable. When will I have one my own? Qin Yuchu's brow furrowed, and her cheeks puffed out. Big sister, Carrie, the little girl, perhaps tired from rocking, raised her arms, asking to be held. Call me Andy. Qin Yuchu's eyes widened as she poked Nan's chubby cheek with a finger. How many times have I taught you? Why can't you learn? Startled by the poke, Nan visibly froze. The word Annie was on the tip of her tongue, but she forgot how to say it. Qin Yuchu was exasperated. She pressed her lips together tightly, stubbornly refusing to pick her up unless Nan called her correctly today. Then they stared at each other, big eyes meeting small. Nan, with her arms still raised, gazed at the beautiful big eyes before her and completely forgot what she had wanted just moments ago. Suddenly, Qin Yuchu's brow twitched. Call me Jima. Jio. Ma. Qin Yuchu guided her earnestly. Jio. Ma. Nan actually managed to say it perfectly and clearly. Qin Yuchu laughed so hard she practically vibrated, scooping Nan up and planting 2 firm kisses on her cheeks. Ha ha ha. I wonder what expression Ai will have when she hears Nan call me this. Yuchu thought mischievously. When Qin Yuchu found out that the gambling addict who had never treated her as his own child and had plotted to sell her off before she was even 10 was not her biological father, she was relieved. If she hadn't become the provincial top scholar in the entrance exams, not only making the newspapers, but also having county officials personally visit and present her with a hefty scholarship on camera, she would never have had the chance to go to university. But even so, she only held that large scholarship for the cameras. Afterwards, even the train ticket to Hanchang was paid for by money she slowly saved up from collecting and selling discarded textbooks from school. Back then, when she learned that Fu Heng also had no father, she felt a small sense of gladness. At least, they had something in common. However, her biological father found her, and he was a capitalist. But she wasn't happy because she felt that the only common ground she shared with Fu Heng was about to disappear. Fortunately, the clever Yuchu discovered the truth about old Duan. Haha, their common ground had increased again. Therefore, she eagerly anticipated Fu Heng and old Duan acknowledging each other as father and son. But old Wang was a genuinely good person. He treated Ai with true, heartfelt kindness, just like Fu Heng treated her. This made Yuchu very hesitant, as she was the least suitable person to reveal this matter. And Ai, on her part, didn't seem to have any intention of letting them acknowledge each other. So, Yuchu thought of a roundabout approach. Nan, she went to great lengths to arrange that accidental meeting in the supermarket. As expected, no woman, especially one who had been a mother, could cruelly reject such an adorably dorky child with a pitiful background. Ai quickly fell for her charms. She wasn't even against having Nan over for the new year. As for old Duan, from the moment he entrusted the child to her, Qin Yuchu knew that he was actually very eager deep down. So, let's start with Jima. Qin Yuchu smiled sweetly, while Nan, seemingly fascinated by the new term, kept repeating Jima over and over. Each time Nan said it, Qin Yuchu would kiss her on the cheek and then beam with delight for a long time. What an adorable child. A very magnetic voice complimented from not far away. Qin Yuchu turned towards the voice and saw a tall man. He was clearly a man of sophisticated, perhaps slightly bourgeois taste. He was stylishly dressed in sharply creased trousers, gleaming leather shoes, and a long cashmere coat. Beneath it, his shirt collar was impeccably ironed, and a flamboyant silk scarf added an exquisite touch. Qin Yuchu smiled at him, but said nothing. With just one glance, she could tell that the man wasn't complimenting the child, as his gaze had been fixed on her the entire time. Are you her older sister? The man took a few steps forward, a gentle smile on his face. Qin Yuchu raised an eyebrow, then clicked her tongue at Nan, making a tc sound. Nan seemed to understand this sound cue, and in her sweet, soft voice, loudly called out, Jiuma. Yuchu smiled again, her smile as radiant as spring blossoms. The man's expression froze. He had been watching from a distance, and hadn't heard Yuchu teasing the child. He was simply captivated by Yuchu's stunning beauty and her uniquely alluring figure. As he got closer, he saw her eyes, which were as bright as stars. He couldn't understand how such pure eyes could also appear so profound. However, the child cry of Juma caught him completely off guard. Juma wasn't like Yima, i.e., or big sister? Jioma, first, you need to have an uncle. No, miss, how old are you even? Actually, you're not exactly a child. But still, how old can you be? And already a Jioma? Nan, after being held for a while with the child's restless nature and some energy restored, began to kick her legs, wanting to be put down. Qin Yuchu placed Nan on the grass, and the little girl, like an untamed puppy, frolicked for a moment, then ran off again. Ever since she learned to walk, Nan hadn't run around wildly like this. Just as she was starting to walk, her home was gone, and she experienced life's darkness and dangers. Fortunately, being so young, she didn't remember much. But while the child forgets, the adults remember. After she was found, she was placed under the strictest protection. Those who protected and cared for her, how could they dare let her run like this? So, Nan was particularly fond of this Annie. As the child ran off, Yuchu, feeling a bit tired, sat down on a park bench, enviously watching the tireless little figure. Just you wait. Annie is working hard to get you a little brother. Spring festival here is so deserted, isn't it? Such a big park and only one child here. The man, apparently not giving up, took 2 more steps towards the bench. Yuchu frowned slightly, giving him a sidelong glance. The man's heart skipped a beat. How could such bright, radiant eyes cast such an intoxicating gaze? It was as they say, with beautiful eyes, even an eye roll could be misinterpreted. Sorry, I just got back from abroad. Over there, nobody celebrates Spring Festival. The parks will be bustling right now. Not like here, where the streets are empty. The man said this with apparent sentiment, his chin slightly raised, exuding an air of aloof nobility that seemed out of sync with the world around him. As far as I know, over there, hospitals and fire departments take holidays during Christmas, right? Yuchu blinked, asking in a very innocent tone. The man visibly stiffened, his jaw twitching from her retort. Indeed, there had been news stories about fires during Christmas where emergency calls to the fire department were met with the response that firefighters were on holiday. There were even more outrageous stories. Firefighters abandoning a blaze halfway through because it was their lunch break, driving off in the fire truck to eat. By the time they returned, the fire was out, but so was the house, burned to the ground. That's a religious holiday for them, a matter of faith, the man explained lamely. Qin Yuchu averted her gaze, not wanting to continue conversing with an idiot. In front of the child, too. What if foolishness is contagious? It's quite cold out. Would you like to come to my cafe for a bit? I own one just over there. The man, still persistent, seemed to have taken her earlier eye roll as a sign of great encouragement. It's the one where that G-Wagon is parked out front. That G-Wagon is mine, too. Just bought it after coming back. The man took another step forward, making a move to sit down on a bench. If you're thinking of sitting down, I suggest you ask those 6 burly men first. A friendly reminder, 2 of them have rather short fuses, Yuchu said calmly, without turning her head. The man's movement to approach froze once more. You'll see them if you turn around, Yuchu added. The man stiffly turned his head and, sure enough, saw 6 hulking figures. Wow. One of them was truly imposing. Almost 2 meters tall, wasn't he? The 6 men were positioned at different points, and the nearly 2-meter-tall giant was now walking towards him with a grave expression. The man, startled, instinctively took several steps back, creating a safe distance between himself and Yuchu. The big man's pace noticeably slowed, but he continued to approach him steadily. The man instantly panicked. Glancing around anxiously, he saw a business van parked nearby open, a man and a woman stepping out. From another direction, 3 fierce-looking men emerged from a minivan. Oops, sorry, I miscounted. Didn't include her people, Yuchu said with a sweet smile, gesturing with her chin towards the little girl running wildly in the distance. Sweat beaded on the man's forehead. What kind of people were these? 2 young women strolling in a park, followed by over a dozen people? Judging by their demeanor, they didn't even seem to be from the same security company. Having spent years abroad, he was particularly sensitive to a gesture made by one of the men who got out of the minivan. That move you just made. You're not reaching for a piece, are you? Aren't guns banned in this country? The 2-meter-tall man had now reached them, silently positioning himself between Yuchu and the man. Sis-in-law, should we take care of him? The big man's voice was cold, his narrow eyes fixed intently on the other man's calves. No kidding, that stare sent a chill right down the man's calves. How to describe that look? Eager to try something? Long-awaited anticipation? Excitement under a cold exterior? Expectation mixed with ruthlessness? A leg fetish? Who stares at someone's calves like that? The man couldn't help but glance instinctively at the bodyguard's ankles. Black socks? Don't mess around, Qin Yuchu chuckled. These 6 men had appeared after Fu Hang found out she'd bought a beauty salon. She wasn't sure if it was Fu Hang's idea or Baldy Long's. Anyway, Qin Yuchu had a feeling Baldy Long had assigned his 6 fiercest-looking underlings to her. The man, unable to bear the bodyguard's gaze any longer, finally walked away, looking flustered. A flicker of disappointment crossed the bodyguard's eyes. Missed another chance. I've seen you a few times. Why do you always stare at people's calves? Qin Yuchu had a particularly strong impression of this man. It seemed he was there when they went to rescue Shen Qingluan. I have a unique skill, the heaven-crippling burst kick. It can break a leg in one move. Hearing sis-in-law's question, the man perked up instantly. He couldn't give a practical demonstration, but explaining the theory was something. It had been so tough for him. He'd practiced this ultimate skill for so long, but hadn't gotten a chance to use it. Opportunity, indeed, favors the prepared. But he missed it, ultimately missed it. At one point, he even considered intentionally causing some trouble, getting himself locked up, just to find young Master Wang and make up for that past regret. Otherwise, his life felt incomplete. A unique skill? Yuchu, playing the perfect straight man, raised her eyebrows exaggeratedly. That's right, a unique skill. The heaven-crippling burst kick. After my research and hard practice, if you kick at a 45-degree diagonal from 39 degrees superlaterally, aiming 1 inch below the kneecap, crack, that leg is guaranteed to break. Even if it heals, it'll be a lifelong disability. The man ran to a potted plant, gesticulating animatedly as he explained. So impressive. Qin Yuchu clapped dramatically, almost bursting with laughter. Thank you for the praise, sis-in-law. Next time some fool doesn't watch his step, just give me the nod, and I'll make sure he spends the rest of his life on crutches. The man's eyes widened with excitement, and he couldn't help but look again in the direction the other man had gone. He hasn't gone far. If you give a signal now, I can still catch him. What's your name? Yuchu couldn't help but laugh again, seeing the look in his eyes. Where did Baldy find these guys? She suddenly seemed to understand why Fu Hang kept Baldy Long around as his personal assistant. My name is Nian Bing. Nian as in year, Bing as in ice. The man jolted. Sis-in-law was asking for his name? Did this mean she was going to remember him? His time to shine had come. Actually, in Nian Bing's heart, following sis-in-law offered better prospects than following Big Brother. Because although Big Brother was rumored to be a formidable fighter, Nian Bing had never seen it himself. Plus, given Big Brother's status, he probably didn't get his hands dirty often. It was said that even Brother Long hadn't fought in a long time. But sis-in-law was different. That wine bottle smash had been very real and impactful, earning merits under sis-in-law's command. This was the man's simple, earnest thought. How about you be my driver? Qin Yuchu suddenly said with a smile. Driver? The man's smile froze on his face. My heaven-crippling burst kick is for breaking legs, not for stepping on brakes. In the end, because Nian Bing didn't have a driver's license, he once again regrettably missed this opportunity. Fu Hang had just settled into a booth near the entrance of the coffee shop. For dramatic effect, he'd deliberately chosen the same spot where he'd reunited with Lee Wei Yang. The only problem was he realized he'd really slipped. He couldn't, for the life of him, recall whether Lee Wei Yang had ordered a cappuccino or a caramel macchiato that day. You should try our iced Americano. It's absolutely the best in Hangzhou. A deep, alluring male voice spoke up beside him. Fu Hang was still puzzling over it when a stylishly dressed man sat down opposite him. Fu Hang stared, dumbfounded. Was this guy nuts? An iced Americano on a freezing day like this? Was he even here for coffee? He was just here to check in for his social media, all right? And who was this guy anyway? Surely, he wasn't trying to hit on him? Fu Hang fought the urge to check out the man's socks. You know, the last guy who gawked at me like that is still drooling somewhere. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the owner of this cafe. I just got back from overseas and brought with me the most authentic brewing methods. Seeing Fu Hang's wary expression, the man gave a wry, inward smile. Just as he thought, compared to the open and outgoing people overseas, the youth here were still a bit provincial. Such a great ambience, too. A sunny afternoon, good coffee. Shouldn't this be the time to make new friends, to discuss life? He just tried to show off in the park and ended up making a fool of himself, like kicking granite. Now, he desperately needed an outlet to get his head straight. Isn't the owner here a woman? Fu Hang frowned slightly. He'd been here plenty of times. Shen Qingluan adored their packaging. Great for photos. I just took over. Right, doesn't matter. 1 cappuccino and 1 caramel macchiato. Fu Hang cut him off. Since he couldn't remember which, he'd just order both for now. Then he'd gamble on the 50% chance it would have the desired extra impact. Speed was key. This kind of emotional finishing blow was time-sensitive. If he missed the window, it wouldn't have the same effect on his top-ranking female fan. You're sure you don't want to try the iced Americano? The man seemed reluctant to give up. Fine, and a hot, iced Americano then. Fu Hang pulled out his phone and started looking for the right angle. Huh. The man's expression contorted. One will be fine too. My stomach's a bit sensitive. I can't handle ice-cold drinks. Could you move a bit, please? I need to adjust my angle. Fu Hang waved dismissively at the man. The man felt a profound sense of ennui. Was there truly no one in this country who could appreciate his taste? He was starting to regret coming back, but he just couldn't find work abroad. He'd painstakingly studied coffee brewing for 3 years, only to be stunned, just as he was ready to make his mark, to find that kung fu tea was suddenly all the rage overseas. The man walked into the shop, looking glum. 1 cappuccino, 1 caramel macchiato, he told the barista inside, not bothering to add, against his better judgment, and a warm, iced Americano. Sweetness level, the barista asked attentively. Whatever. What does he know about coffee? The owner rolled his eyes. Clearly, the guy was just here to take photos for his social media. The barista paused, then poked her head out from behind the counter. The barista's brow furrowed. You know him? The owner asked, intrigued. He's a delivery guy, the barista said confidently, recalling the image from her memory. I knew it. Huh. Just goes to show, clothes really do make the man. Dress him up a bit. And who'd guess he's just a delivery guy? A sneer played on the owner's lips. He'd only approached Fu Hang himself, cutting in front of the barista, because Fu Hang looked so well-dressed. Running a coffee shop, much like a tea house, was all about cultivating regulars. That's what those kung fu tea vendors overseas had taught him. But his girlfriend is gorgeous. The barista shot a glance at her pretentious new boss. She vividly remembered this delivery guy and the impeccably dressed career woman who'd been crying her eyes out, a beautiful, sorrowful sight. The visual impact, the sheer incongruity of it all. It was an image few could forget. Gorgeous, absolutely stunning. A rare beauty, the barista gushed. The owner's lip twitched. He still found the local penchant for hyperbole a bit much to stomach. Still, the phrase rare beauty reminded him of the girl he'd bumped into in the park earlier. She was a true rare beauty. Such a shame. Married off so young, practically a kid herself, and already someone's auntie-in-law by marriage. And, judging by those tough-looking bodyguards, her nephew's uncle probably wasn't the respectable sort either. Sigh. Beauty and misfortune often go hand in hand. Life felt utterly bland. The owner picked up his copy of Das Kapital, the one he'd been failing to finish for 7 years. The barista finished making the coffees. Seeing her boss posturing again, she shrugged in resignation and carried the tray over to Fu Hang. Sir, your coffee. The barista smiled politely, placing the cappuccino in front of Fu Hang and the caramel macchiato on the opposite side of the table. Fu Hang raised an eyebrow slightly. He'd caught that. She hadn't even asked, yet she knew which one was his, and he hadn't said he was waiting for anyone. Hasn't your girlfriend arrived yet? This one won't be as good if it gets cold, the barista added kindly when she saw Fu Hang looking at her. You know me? Fu Hang's interest was piqued. You and your girlfriend have been here before. The barista's smile was radiant. It was true what they said about clothes, she thought. Without his delivery uniform, this man was actually quite handsome, the kind you appreciate more the longer you look. No wonder his girlfriend didn't mind his job. We came here together. Wait, my girlfriend ordered this one. Fu Hang got it instantly. Shen Qingluan liked this cafe, true, but she'd never come here for coffee with him. So, the girlfriend the barista was referring to had to be Lee Wei Yang? Caramel macchiato, half sweet, the barista replied earnestly. She wouldn't have remembered the order for just anyone, but the impression this couple had left on her had been too profound. That scene had made her believe in love again, and she genuinely wished them well. From how things looked that day, it seemed something significant had happened between them. The girl had been crying so heartbrokenly, yet there was a hint of profound happiness in her tears too. Perfect. Fu Hang snapped his fingers and pointed at the barista. The barista gave a little shrug, feeling a slight tingle, as if she'd just been playfully hit on. Fu Hang, satisfied with the composition before him, pressed the capture button on his phone. The photo was an empty shot. Inside the cool, quiet cafe, just 2 steaming cups of coffee. An empty frame, no people, 2 coffees, a familiar scene, and the photographer unseen. He added no caption, simply sending the photo directly to his top fan. His master-level photography skills, finally put to use for work. You're really good. Ever considered a job change? Fu Hang looked up, calling out to the barista before she'd gone too far. This girl was a real talent. He'd only sat here once before, and she even remembered what Lee Wei Yang had ordered. Job change. The barista looked astonished. To Ganlu milk tea. Pick any branch you like. You can be the manager there. Fu Hang replied with utmost seriousness. Is this how you pick up girls? The barista didn't answer, but a teasing voice came from behind Fu Hang. Every hair on Fu Hang's body stood on end. He turned his head stiffly and saw a breathtaking beauty holding a child. She's quite competent. Fu Hang was momentarily a loss for words. Qin Yuchu said nothing, her gaze fixed on the barista, assessing her as if to verify the competent part of Fu Hang's description. What are you doing here? Fu Hang quickly cut in, trying to diffuse Qin Yuchu's building intensity. In that split second, he felt the already weak afternoon sun dim by several shades. He could almost see a blue loading bar materializing above Qin Yuchu's head. The barista, wearing a bewildered expression, beat a hasty retreat, her mind reeling with questions. So, the girl from the other day wasn't his girlfriend? No, Weiqi. This one today is holding a child. So, was the other girl the mistress? Is that why she was crying so devastatingly? In mere seconds, the barista had mentally scripted an entire 80-episode romantic drama. It left her wondering, should she still believe in love? Believe in it? But this guy seems like a total scumbag. Don't believe in it? But then, a delivery guy. What did he possibly have going for him to deserve two stunning women completely devoted to him? One even having his child? You knew I was coming? Qin Yuchu sat down, holding the child, and looked coldly at the still steaming caramel macchiato in front of her. Ahem, it won't taste good if it gets cold. Fu Hang awkwardly tried to change the subject. This wasn't an easy topic to address. Didn't know she was coming? But he'd obviously ordered 2 drinks. If not for her, then for someone else. Knew she was coming? How would he know? Did the bodyguards tell him? Then again, that wouldn't be protection. That would be tracking and surveillance. Go get some hot water. Nanan's bottle is cold. Yuchu shot Fu Hang a look and handed Nanan's bottle to him. Okay. Fu Hang's reply was unusually crisp, and he practically jogged to the counter. Qin Yuchu looked down at the 2 coffees on the table, picked up the caramel macchiato, and took a sip. Only moderately sweet? Oomph. I always get mine much sweeter. Then, without a word, she swapped the positions of the 2 coffees. Could you add some hot water? Lukewarm will be fine. Fu Hang walked to the counter and handed over the bottle. Just a moment. The barista's expression was still strange. I was serious just now. Fu Hang said, if you're interested, go to Ganlu Milk Tea and call this number. He took a notepad from the counter and jotted down Xia Xiaofeng's number. Although Xia Xiaofeng was no longer at Ganlu Milk Tea, arranging a store manager position should still be no problem. The barista returned with the refilled bottle, holding the note and looking a bit dazed. You're not trying to play me, are you? Could I even? Compared to those 2, I'm way out of my league, aren't I? You mean his really pretty girlfriend, the one outside? The owner's head suddenly poked over. When Fu Hang had come in earlier, he had recognized the bottle in Fu Hang's hand. It was identical. So, he curiously peeked outside. This must be the original partner, right? But it wasn't her last time, the barista replied, stunned. Is that one as attractive as this one? The owner's voice was laced with disbelief. They're about on par. This one is younger and cuter. The other one was more mature and alluring. The owner silently stared at the scene outside, which looked like a family of 3. He quietly took out his phone and re-downloaded the Tomato Novel app he had uninstalled yesterday. He'd inexplicably installed it from a pop-up while scrolling through short videos. At first, he found it quite interesting, but after flipping through a few novels, he realized they were all about either security guards or delivery drivers, each one in a logical power fantasy. Not only were they mindless and idiotic, they made him, a man who read Das Kapital, feel ashamed. But then he looked back at the delivery driver outside, and he felt there was more to Tomato Novel than he'd thought. Auntie, Nanan hugged her bottle and took a big gulp. Satisfied, she subconsciously called out the new word she had learned today. Good girl. Yuchu kissed her on the cheek. Auntie. Fu Hang's eyes widened. That old Duan, how malicious can he be? Teaching the child this? Is he trying to force me into some messed up family hierarchy? She kept calling me big sis, and I couldn't get her to change it. So I tried teaching her other things, and she picked up Annie right away, Qin Yuchu said, blinking her eyes. But she can't call you that, can she? Then big sis. Yochu's big eyes twinkled. Fu Hang fell silent. He and old Duan were like brothers. If old Duan's granddaughter called Yuchu big sis, then what was he supposed to call Yuchu? Paternal aunt? For some reason, he was reminded of the hotel manager earlier who had addressed him with that overly formal title of esteemed elder uncle-in-law. Come, call him uncle, Yuchu prompted, holding Nanan and pointing at Fu Hang. Fu Hang suddenly tensed up, staring intently at Nanan. his gaze seemingly telling her, "If you dare call me that, I'll go beat up your grandpa later." Fortunately, Nan seemed to feel the immense pressure. She pouted her little lips, her mouth forming a hesitant sound for a long time, but the full uncle never emerged. Fu Hang let out a long sigh of relief. "By the way, have you met the owner of this place?" Qin Yuchu picked up her cappuccino and asked casually. "That pretentious guy?" Fu Hang raised an eyebrow. He tried to hit on me earlier." Yochu's gaze rested on the milk foam of her coffee, her eyes feigning innocence. Fu Hang's eyes narrowed slightly, a dangerous aura erupting from within him. The warm winter sun seemed to lose all its heat as Fu Hang, his face grim, slowly stood up. All right, Yinbing stopped him. "He almost got his legs broken," Qin Yuchu said, looking up at Fu Hang over her coffee cup, the corners of her lips curving up bit by bit. "Yinbing? Who's that?" Fu Hang sat back down, but the intense aura around him hadn't dissipated. "You don't know him? That tall guy, the one who's always staring at people's calves." Qin Yuchu glanced around, but didn't see any sign of a bodyguard. But as soon as she mentioned the calf-staring trait, Fu Hang understood instantly. Baldy brought him over. The intense aura around Fu Hang vanished completely. "Baldy Dragon is pretty capable, huh?" Putting that oaf next to Yuchu is undoubtedly like tethering a Tibetan Mastiff to her side. It's like putting up a moving sign, "Do not approach, vicious dog bites." That guy's deterrent power is even higher than a GT900. Baldy handled this beautifully. Fu Hang exclaimed sincerely. Qin Yuchu tilted her head, quietly watching Fu Hang's expressions change, her smile growing brighter and brighter. "Accompany me to Jingsheng tomorrow," Qin Yuchu suddenly said. "To Jingsheng?" Fu Hang paused. "They gave us over 100 stores. It's not too much to pay them a New Year's visit, right?" Qin Yuchu asked tentatively in a low voice. "Okay." Fu Hang looked at Yuchu seriously and replied calmly. "The second day of the new year is traditionally when a married daughter visits her parental home." Fu Hang wouldn't and couldn't refuse. Just as he had told Qin Zongyi, when Yuchu went to Jingsheng was entirely up to her. "Are we going home for dinner tonight?" Mom called earlier to ask. Qin Yuchu smiled again, hugging Nan in her arms especially tight. "We'll go back together in a bit." Fu Hang smiled too. He suddenly realized that when Yuchu addressed his mother, apart from the first slip of the tongue, she always politely called her auntie to her face. But whenever it was just the two of them, and his mother wasn't present, she would habitually call her mom. On this first night of the new year, Qin Yuchu unexpectedly suggested spending the night at Yanshuwan. Her reason was quite compelling. A house shouldn't be empty during the new year. It needs people in it to have a lively atmosphere. Fu Hang, naturally, couldn't refuse. But when Fu Hang emerged from the large bathtub, wrapped in a towel, his eyes went wide. Standing gracefully before the bedroom's floor-to-ceiling window was a girl in an old-school uniform. Her long bangs covered much of her face, and her thick, black-rimmed glasses seemed heavy and somber. She looked down, her hands tightly clutching the hem of her clothes, looking at him frail and timid. Fu Hang felt as if his heart had suddenly shattered. The softest part of his inner self had been fiercely prodded. "Just because I glanced at you one more time in the crowd." For some reason, this song lyric echoed in Fu Hang's mind. It was Yochu's voice, declaring it to the world as she stood at the cafeteria entrance. What is a white moonlight? Fu Hang had once thought that Shen Qingluan, standing in front of the school's package station on that rainy day, was his. But it wasn't until this moment that Fu Hang understood. This old school uniform, which Qin Yuchu still hadn't thrown away, this was his white moonlight. Tears welled up in the corners of Fu Hang's eyes as he silently gazed at the timid, helpless girl before him. I only have this body." Qin Yuchu's head was bowed very low, her chin almost touching her prominent chest. Her voice was soft, so soft that even a grandmaster's auditory system almost failed to pick it up. She tremblingly lifted her right foot, hesitantly stepped on her left canvas shoe, and slipped her white-socked foot out. Then, her left white-socked foot stepped on the heel of her right shoe, and in the same manner, she removed her right old canvas shoe. Her toes, clad in white socks, curled inward slightly as she stood uneasily on the polished hardwood floor. That sentence, that tone, that expression, that gesture, it made Fu Hang, still immersed in a first love-like tenderness, transform in an instant. He opened a gaping, blood-red maw, bared stinking fangs, and waved sharp claws, turning into a fiend, a perpetrator of every imaginable evil, an inhuman monster, a brute anathema to all reason and nature. That night, the depraved brute and the school-uniformed beauty battled for 300 rounds. The brute, overcome by his animalistic nature, had a record of 1 win, 1 draw, and 1 loss. Without any buffs to aid him, the brute was soundly suppressed by the righteous beauty in the 3rd round. In the early hours of the 2nd day of the Lunar New Year, the watered-down Grandmaster stared at the dark ceiling, utterly dejected. He hesitated. There was still an end-of-year lottery ticket in the warehouse he hadn't used. Should he gamble on it? If he won, it would be like trading a bird gun for a cannon, a bicycle for a motorcycle. Fu Hang was very tempted, his heart stirred. Brother Long once said that, with my looks, I could charge 2,000 session. Yu Chu, panting beside him, suddenly blurted out of nowhere. Fu Hang frowned slightly, his thoughts pulled back to the present. The 350,000 I owed you is almost paid off, Yu Chu said, turning over and draping her leg over Fu Hang. Fu Hang's mouth twitched. 2,000 session? 350,000? Almost paid off? Wait, had they been at it that often? As an academic ace, her math should be decent, right? A finance major should have studied statistics. No wonder he felt so drained. At this rate, even an animal would die of exhaustion. Wait, I also bought you an apartment. That was over 2 million, wasn't it? No, I also gave you a car with 2 billion in it. Fu Hang gradually came to his senses, counting on his fingers. Oh right, 2 billion. That's 100,000 times. You'll have to work hard, or you'll be losing money, Yu Chu said, tracing circles on Fu Hang's chest with her finger. Fu Hang suddenly felt the urge to slap himself. 100,000 times. Conservatively estimating, even if he maintained his Grandmaster abilities until he was 100. That was another 72 years. On average, without rest, that was 4 times a day. Averaging it out further, once every 6 hours, until he was 100? Fu Hang, who hadn't even passed math in his college entrance exams, found his calculation skills surprisingly sharp at this moment. How about I give you Yuanbua? Fu Hang suddenly said. Okay, Qin Yu Chu replied without a shred of hesitation. This was the 3rd time Fu Hang had said the same thing. The first time was when they were buying the apartment. Qin Yu Chu knew Fu Hang was just venting. She had decisively refused. The second time was after Shen Qingluan's marriage proposal. Qin Yu Chu still knew it was Fu Hang's guilt toward her. She had refused again. This was the 3rd time. Qin Yu Chu seemed to have vaguely guessed the reason. She readily agreed. In fact, Yu Chu was already very wealthy, far wealthier than Fu Hang had anticipated. The 2 billion Fu Hang had given her wasn't just sitting idly earning interest. The finance was had invested it in overseas financial markets. Her talent as an academic ace was truly unleashed then, especially after Fu Hang's personal tutelage. She had transformed into a masked bandit, secretly making a killing in the overseas markets. And as she continued her conquests, she discovered she had a mysterious ally. This person's methods were strikingly similar to hers. At first, she thought it was Fu Hang helping her, but later she realized it wasn't him, but someone else who was also imitating Fu Hang's techniques. The world was never short of geniuses. That person's methods resembled Fu Hang's, but lacked his almost supernatural unpredictability, possessing instead a more devious and daring quality. After discovering this, Qin Yu Chu coordinated seamlessly with this ally in the overseas markets. Working together, they had stealthily and very nearly cleaned out their targets. A few times, they got carried away in their frenzy and nearly exposed themselves. Fortunately, Fu Hang had intervened in time, drawing fire at critical moments and keeping them hidden. This man's tenderness always manifested in silent ways. Now I'm a CEO too. Next step, take down Hung Yu and keep Fu Hang as my boy toy. Early the next morning, Fu Hang and Qin Yu Chu packed light and headed to the airport. In the VIP lounge of Han City International Airport, Fu Hang had a scarf draped over his face, dozing with his eyes half closed. Grandmasters required little sleep, but they did get tired, especially after frequent clashes with another Grandmaster. Qin Yu Chu sat obediently beside him, scrolling through her phone. But a closer look revealed she was checking her workgroup chats. Yuan Bo was flourishing. Just as that pretentious guy in a coffee shop had said, foreigners didn't celebrate Lunar New Year, and Yuan Bo, whose main trade was overseas, had been insanely busy these past few days. Solomon's assets in the Asia-Pacific region had been taken over by Qin Yu Chu in a rather crude manner. Although Jack Solomon's authority within his company was currently curtailed, Solomon Company seemed to be treading carefully, displaying a strange tolerance for Yuanbua's aggressive expansion. Just half an hour ago, Qin Yu Chu had sent out an appointment notice to herself in the company's internal group chat. Comrade Qin Yu Chu, formerly assistant to the president of Yuanbua Trade, is hereby promoted to Executive CEO of Yuan Trade. This appointment document caused not a ripple within the company. Instead, it felt as if the Dowager Empress who had been ruling from behind the curtain had finally stepped onto the main stage. Her informal decree had simply become an imperial edict. Among them, Lu Junkai, the newly appointed acting leader of Project Team 3, who was soon to depart for South Africa to develop the market, was particularly excited. The blueprint in his mind became clear and distinct once more. "Junior, wait for me to return from my expedition." "Excuse me, would you mind moving? There are quite a few of us." A relatively polite voice sounded nearby. Qingluan looked up, puzzled. Standing before her was a young girl with a very forced smile. Not far behind her stood a large group of over a dozen people. Among them, one woman was particularly conspicuous. Although she wore a mask, she had an incredibly exaggerated sun hat perched on her head in the middle of winter, as if afraid people wouldn't notice her. Qingluan put down her phone and looked around, confused. It was the second day of the Lunar New Year, and the airport, especially the VIP lounge, wasn't very crowded. There were plenty of empty seats around. However, the area where they were sitting was indeed the largest rest area, cordoned off by expensive sofas to form a separate section. This was Baldy Long's current habit. For this trip to the capital, they had actually brought quite a few people. Ever since Fu Hang discovered that showing off was more satisfying than playing humble, he always traveled with a large entourage. Whether it was for safety was another matter, but it certainly saved a lot of trouble. However, Fu Hang didn't like being surrounded by a crowd, even on a plane, so everyone else had been arranged in business class. Only Baldy Long and Nian Bing were with him. But at that moment, the two big guys had gone off to find a place to smoke. Qingluan glanced at Fu Hang, who was still sprawled inelegantly and motionless, then carefully raised a finger to her lips. "Sure." The meaning was clear. The young girl immediately looked troubled and turned helplessly towards the group behind her. "What's going on? Can't even handle a simple thing like this? It's just asking them to move." A shrill voice cut through the air as a flamboyant man strode forward from the crowd. The young girl retreated to the side, looking aggrieved, while the flamboyant man stared coldly at Qingluan. "Can you help coordinate this?" The flamboyant man stared at Qingluan for a good while, without saying anything, then turned and shouted loudly at the ground staff in the distance. This shout was even louder and more piercing than the last. Fu Hang, who was lying down, stirred. His right hand instinctively moved to pull off the scarf covering his face, but Qingluan gently pressed it back down. Fu Hang stilled, only wriggling his body slightly. A ground staff member hurried over, their expression equally troubled. "It's true you have a lot of people, but this is the first-class lounge. I have records of how many first-class tickets were sold today. For more than 10 of you to barge in like this is already a violation." Qingluan remained silent. Just as she was about to take out her phone to call Baldy Long, she saw a large, bald head emerge from the smoking room in the distance. Qingluan's eyebrows twitched, and she lowered her phone. The bald man in the distance immediately stubbed out his cigarette and hurried over. Baldy Long was quite recognizable. The flamboyant man also noticed Baldy Long's arrival, a sneer playing on his lips. But soon, the flamboyant man noticed the nearly 2-meter-tall man behind Baldy Long. A flicker of astonishment crossed his eyes, then turned into terror. After instinctively retreating 3 steps, he looked in disbelief at the man lying still as a corpse, his face covered. Baldy Long stood firmly in front of Qingluan and, without showing any emotion, waved dismissively at the troubled ground staff member, indicating she could go about her business. But how could the ground staff member dare to leave? With both sides at loggerheads, if an argument broke out, wouldn't it still be her responsibility? Especially that group of over a dozen people. The woman was a minor celebrity. These celebrities were the hardest to deal with because they attracted a lot of attention and would post things online at the drop of a hat, making public opinion difficult to manage. Baldy Long had a strong presence, his slightly narrowed eyes appearing very composed. But Nian Bing behind him was visibly excited. His gaze was busy, constantly seeking Qingluan's approval while also repeatedly scanning the calves of the group. "Boss lady, give the order. My heaven-crippling kick is itching for action." But unfortunately, Qingluan merely raised a finger to her lips. The flamboyant man's reaction was also very swift. Under the astonished gaze of the ground staff, he stood at attention, bowed deeply at a 90-degree angle, and then quickly led his people away. Soon, only the flamboyant man and the woman wearing an exaggerated sun hat remained from that group. The others left the waiting lounge very quietly. "You know them?" Qingluan was also a bit bewildered, casting a suspicious glance at Baldy Long. Baldy Long shook his head and turned to look at Nian Bing, because he realized the flamboyant man had recognized Nian Bing. When did this simpleton become so intimidating? Nian Bing, however, looked dejected, glaring resentfully at the flamboyant man's calves. He felt he might still need to go in for a bit. Young Master Wang might have placed some vicious curse on him back then, a curse that had become a stumbling block in his career. Big brother and sister-in-law were visiting her parents, and they actually booked him a first-class ticket. What had he, Nian Bing, done to deserve this? This was the same treatment as Brother Long, and yet he, Nian Bing, had achieved nothing to date. How shameful! Baldy Long rolled his eyes and sat down a little further away, a flicker of regret in his heart for transferring this simpleton to the boss lady's side. But Baldy Long had just sat down when he immediately stood up again, because the woman who had just left was walking over again. So it was her? Baldy Long recognized the woman who had removed her mask and hat, and Qin Yuchu also had a moment of realization at the same time. The young pop queen, Qian, the female singer who had been utterly crushed by Zhuge Yun. Qian was filled with regret. A small incident that day, which should have been a golden opportunity to connect with a powerful figure, had nearly ruined her career because of her own misunderstanding. At first, she hadn't really cared much. Although being grabbed by the neck and thrown out was humiliating, at least she hadn't been photographed, right? Moreover, Wei Yang Entertainment had been decisive with the compensation. No haggling. They paid the breach of contract fee directly. But who would have thought that Wei Yang Entertainment would actually manage to make the newcomer who replaced her famous? She had advanced triumphantly, unstoppable. The theme song for Ganlu Milk Tea, which countless singers and artists had begged for to no avail, Zhuge Yun apparently didn't even have time to sing. And just before the new year, Heavenly King Lu's Gong Shi Fa Kai was released and quickly became a phenomenal hit. Now, almost every mall and supermarket across the country was playing Gong Shi Fa Kai on a loop. Many times, waking from dreams in the middle of the night, Qian would wonder, if she had seized that opportunity back then, would all of this have been hers? Even a big shot of Heavenly King Lu's caliber could experience a resurgence in popularity after collaborating once with the great Qinghe. What about her? Songwriter Qinghe was now a legend in the music industry. To win Qinghe is to win the world. Now, some people even publicly called him Lyric Father and Melody Father. Wei Yang Entertainment's momentum was also frighteningly strong. Several films they were simultaneously preparing had caused a huge stir in the industry, especially the recently announced upcoming Crow 3, which was being hyped to mythical proportions by independent media. Against this backdrop, various artists were eagerly recommending themselves, hoping to collaborate with Wei Yang Entertainment. Lu Yun, another young pop queen of similar fame, had also been crushed by Zhuge Yun, yet she had managed to get a cameo in Crow 3. And she, Qian, had been sentenced to death early on. No cooperation ever. This was personally announced by Lee Wei Yang of Wei Yang Entertainment. Because of this, her diva behavior incident from that day was dug up by independent media, embellished with all sorts of details, and negative comments flooded the internet. It had reached the point where her company was even considering shelving her for a period, especially since Wei Yang Entertainment and Huana Entertainment had clashed over Heavenly King Lu's contract, and even the young master of Huana had backed down. His backing company naturally had more to consider. Almost all resources were being allocated to other artists in the company. She, a dignified young pop queen, had been reduced to performing at various county and city-level local TV stations' spring festival galas over the new year. I'm sorry, my assistant was inexperienced and rude. Qian stood helplessly before the rest area, looking meekly at Qin Yuchu. She didn't know this woman, but the man standing to the side, staring unblinkingly at her calves, was fresh in her memory. It was this brute who had grabbed her by the neck and thrown her delicate self out the door back then. Therefore, it was self-evident who the man with his face covered was. Get up where you fall. Qian felt today was an opportunity, a chance to save her life. At any cost. Qin Yuchu watched the woman with interest. Although she didn't know what had happened between this woman and Fu Hang before, she could tell the woman's intentions from her meek expression at a glance. This wasn't directed at her. Qin Yuchu made no comment and lowered her head, continuing to scroll through her phone. Coincidentally, Fu Hang's phone rang at that very moment. Fu Hang pulled off the scarf and yawned widely. He subtly glanced at the pitiful-looking Qian standing there and answered the call. Boss, the car chase scene is pretty much ready. If it's convenient for you, we can shoot it this afternoon. This afternoon? Fu Hang paused. He knew better than anyone how tight the schedule for this film was. Every second saved in finalizing the script meant an extra second for post-production. Let's do it tomorrow. I have a trip to Jingsheng today. You guys can do some more prep this afternoon. Fu Heng mulled it over for a moment, his head down, not looking at Qin Yuchu. A smile touched Qin Yuchu's lips, and she playfully tapped her feet on the floor a few times. It won't cause much of a delay, right? Qin Yuchu asked calmly after Fu Heng hung up. One day won't make a difference. It's good for them to have more time to prepare, Fu Heng said nonchalantly, putting away his phone and turned to Qian. Mr. Fu, I truly know I was wrong. Qian's eyes reddened, and tears welled up in her trembling gaze. You don't know you were wrong. You know you can't get any money now. Fu Heng raised a hand, cutting her off, then turned to Nian Bing. Nian Bing shuddered, feeling as if a skylight had opened above his head. A surge of spiritual energy poured in from the crown of his head, down his spine, and straight to his right leg. His eyebrows shot up, but when he saw the delicate leg encased in a stocking, he hesitated. So fragile-looking. How could he bring himself to kick it? Just as Nian Bing was hesitating, Baldy Long yanked him back and pushed him aside. Sorry, my boss doesn't like to be disturbed. Baldy Long's tone was sinister. The way he gripped Nian Bing tightly with his right hand made him look like a brutal handler leashing a vicious dog. If you don't get lost now, don't blame me for unleashing him. Mr. Fu, I truly know I was wrong. I'll do anything you ask. Please give me a chance. Qian met Baldy Long's gaze, a flicker of determination in her eyes. If she missed this chance today, she'd truly never be able to make a comeback. Besides, she had unintentionally offended him again today. An entertainer's prime is short. She didn't have many years to waste. And if she could just latch on to Fu Heng, her life would be completely rewritten. The woman beside Fu Heng was indeed slightly more attractive than her, but Fu Heng had spent billions promoting someone like Zhu Biyun, which showed he was quite generous with his affections. And compared to the women around Fu Heng, she believed she had an advantage. She was willing to go all out. She could truly do anything. She wouldn't care how many of you there were. You could even treat her as less than human. If given a real chance, she wouldn't even care if you were human. Tears welled in Qian's eyes, her face a picture of tear-stained beauty, but the implication in her resolute tone was glaringly obvious, utterly naked, and brazenly bold. Fu Heng's mouth twitched. He felt like he'd just been hit on in a very crude and aggressive way. Such blatant provocation, he had only ever seen it from Lana. Really willing to do anything, Qin Yuchu suddenly spoke, her delicate voice carrying its signature coquettish tone. She leaned softly against Fu Heng, one hand naturally resting on his thigh. Dodgy mode, phase 1. The hairs on the back of Fu Heng's neck stood up, and any unrealistic fantasy he might have entertained instantly vanished. But Qian, hearing this tone, felt a surge of joy. As expected of a woman kept by a man of capital, they're into some wild stuff. I could do anything. Qian lowered her head shyly, her pointed canine teeth biting her lower lip. Her bashful, demure, yet spring-like demeanor was truly pitiable and alluring. All right then, go take the postgraduate entrance exam. If you pass, you can come to Wei Yang Entertainment. I'm on good terms with Sister Wei Yang. I can arrange a spot for one person, Qin Yuchu suddenly said, her tone completely serious. Postgraduate entrance exam. Qian couldn't immediately process the information conveyed by this sentence. Is this some new kind of game they play? MHM, a 985 or 211 university. Pick whichever you like. Right, boss? Qin Yuchu turned, snuggling into Fu Heng's embrace, tilting her head up slightly to affectionately rub her forehead against his chin. This time, Fu Heng was genuinely aroused. Ever since his empress had donned her dragon robes, her mastery over him had become increasingly precise. Yes, as long as you graduate with a master's degree, you can ask for any song or any film role you want, Fu Heng said, sitting up straight, his expression solemn and dignified. Damn it, if his grandmaster-level control over his own body hadn't barely held up, he would have made a fool of himself just then. But Qian understood. Yet, she was just a singer from a talent show. Before her debut, she was a bar singer. She only had an associate degree. Qian opened her mouth, her expression dazed. Just then, a ground staff member politely approached to inform them they could board. Fu Heng paid Qian no more attention. Anyway, the conditions have been set. This is to help your personal growth, isn't it? But just after passing through the security gate, Dodgy Phase 1's exclusive voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Want to have a fight in the sky, boss? Fu Heng stumbled, and his steps for the next few paces were strangely awkward. This was Fu Heng's first time in first class. After settling into his seat, he found it quite spacious, with partitions around it, offering good privacy. Fu Hang's mind immediately started to race with wild thoughts. Last night, in the large bathtub at Cloud Comfort No. 1, he tried a water battle with a thug and a pretty soldier. An air battle? Hello, Mr. Fu. I am your dedicated flight attendant for this journey. A soft, charming voice sounded by his ear. Fu Hang, his mind still racing, snapped his head up and stared in astonishment at the slender flight attendant before him. The flight attendant's smile froze, her words cut off by Fu Hang's gaze. How to describe that look? Astonishment? Surprise? Horror? There was even a hint of disgust. It was the first time her charming face had ever been looked at by a man with such an expression. Fu Hang's gaze towards her was very strange, so much so that Qin Yuchu, beside him, noticed something was off. System alert target detected. Zheng Xueli meets conquest requirements. Do you wish to reject? Fu Hang replied coldly in his mind. System, I've explicitly rejected this one. If you pull any more stunts later, don't blame me for getting nasty. Fu Hang added silently. The emotion behind this thought caused Fu Hang's gaze to turn incredibly fierce in an instant. Son of a bitch. A flight attendant, huh? Are you really trying to collect them all like stamps? Damn it, you're not trying to make me a simp. You're trying to make me a stud horse. How the hell did your kind of programming even pass review? Zheng Xueli had been puzzled, but seeing the sudden ferocity in Fu Hang's eyes, she trembled and subconsciously retreated several steps. If not for her professionalism, she would have called for the air marshal. We don't like to be disturbed. If we don't call for you, please don't bother us, Qin Yuchu said softly, frowning slightly. Certainly, ma'am. Qin Yuchu's innocent smile calmed Zheng Xueli slightly. She politely forced a smile and nervously backed away from Fu Hang's seat. Fu Hang turned his head, giving Qin Yuchu a complicated look. His hand, resting on the armrest, was covered by another. There's no need for that. You scared her. Qin Yuchu snuggled closer, pinching Fu Hang's stomach lightly. That very instant, she felt a very unfamiliar kind of happiness. The subtle satisfaction a woman feels when her man avoids another beautiful woman, like the plague, for no apparent reason, is hard to describe. That flight attendant was gorgeous. Flight attendants are generally attractive due to the selection process, but someone with her level of beauty was truly rare. Yet, faced with a girl whose looks rivaled her own, Fu Hang reacted like that. Playing coy, are we? I'll see about that. Qin Yuchu's hands started to wander, though her touch was gentle. Fu Hang's expression remained complicated. He suddenly grew uneasy. A strange sense of panic, an indescribable restlessness, washed over him. Is this plane going to get hijacked or something? Or maybe crash, so I could turn into Homelander and save that client from before? With this system's track record, anything could happen when a potential client was around. Fortunately, the several-hour flight passed uneventfully. The beautiful flight attendant didn't bother them again. Even when Qin Yuchu ordered drinks twice and a snack once, a different flight attendant brought them. Fu Hang, however, was on edge and anxious the entire time, his mind too preoccupied for any thoughts of in-flight romance. The plane landed smoothly at Beijing Capital International Airport. As they deplaned, Fu Hang glanced at the flight attendant again from a distance. System, don't you dare pull any stunts. Fu Hang warned inwardly. Zheng Xueli felt his gaze, and that inexplicable sense of revulsion rose within her again. Is this guy sick in the head? Was he a former passenger? Someone I flirted with? Zheng Xueli couldn't figure out for the life of her and could only force a professional smile for the disembarking passengers. When another first-class passenger passed by and subtly asked for her contact information, Zheng Xueli responded politely, but suddenly found she wasn't in the mood. She kept feeling a pair of cold eyes watching her, making her skin crawl. Fu Hang met up with a large contingent of men in black in the terminal. For this trip to Beijing, besides Baldy Long and Yen Bing, who had a penchant for staring at people's calves, Baldy Long had arranged for 8 other men. They were all handpicked by Baldy Long. No special skills, just big and burly. The type who looked like they'd grab a bottle and jump into a fight at a moment's notice. Fu Hang had a particular fondness for this style of retinue. It made him feel incredibly secure. Nowadays, the soft fear the hard fear the fierce fear the reckless fear the shameless, and the shameless fear the blockheads. So, in the end, it's the fools who stand at the top of the food chain. The imposing group of men in black cleared the way, effectively warding off any onlookers. Consequently, no one paid any attention to Qian Qian and her group, who were silently following behind them. Did he give you the address? The flamboyant man asked, looking at the group of men in black ahead with lingering fear. You had those watchdogs of yours standing by your lounge area earlier. Did you think I'd be stupid enough to approach you to switch seats? Qin Xian, however, was lost in thought, staring silently at Fu Hang's imposing figure. Postpone all my upcoming work if you can, Qin Xian said calmly after a long silence. No problem. As long as you latch onto his thigh, your glorious future is just around the corner. The flamboyant man's eyes burned with fervor. Qin Xian had been silent since she returned and hadn't told him the outcome of her apology and discussion. But he knew Qin Xian. Clearly, Fu Hang had offered some extraordinary terms. Otherwise, she wouldn't be acting this way. Rich people often have no bottom line. But he knew Qin Xian. She was ambitious and willing to go all out, so she would definitely agree. Think about Fong Tiandai. He used to be an agent on the same level as me, and now he's President Fong. Practically second to none at Wei Yang Entertainment. And then, help me find a cram school, Qin Xian said, taking a deep breath as if she had made a momentous decision. Huh? The flamboyant man was stunned. What kind of cram school was she looking for? Was she going that far? Did she need training first? I want to take the postgraduate entrance exam. I want to get into a 985 or 211 university. A look of unyielding determination flashed in Qin Xian's eyes, a resolve that was indomitable, steadfast, and fearless in the face of death. Huh? The flamboyant man was completely dumbfounded. Are you kidding me, sis? You have an associate's degree from a private vocational college, and you're telling me you want to take the postgraduate entrance exam? For a 985 or 211? Have you even looked into adult education programs to upgrade your diploma? Qin Zongyi's residence was a Sihiyuan courtyard house, in Beijing's inner ring, a very, very central one. From over the low wall, one could even see the towering Forbidden City. So much so that when the Qin family came out to greet them, Fu Hang didn't step forward to chat, but instead carefully examined the Sihiyuan. A Sihiyuan in the inner city. Fu Hang, visiting Beijing for the first time, was deeply impressed. He used to think Yunshu 1 was the epitome of luxury mansions, but compared to this, it truly paled in comparison. Fu Hang, if you like it, you and Yu-Chu can move in. If you find us bothersome, we can move to the suburbs. It's quieter there. I wanted to live there for a long time anyway, Qin Zongyi said, standing quietly beside Fu Hang after exchanging pleasantries with Qin Yu-Chu. His words, both spoken and unspoken, clearly treated Fu Hang as anything but an outsider. He had been ecstatic when Qin Yu-Chu suddenly suggested visiting on the second day of the Lunar New Year, especially after learning Fu Hang would be coming too. After meeting Fu Hang that one time, he had paid extra close attention to Fu Hang's activities upon returning. And with a project as massive as The Raven 3, many things simply couldn't be kept secret. Not to mention the entire project getting greenlit all the way, film bases with various scenic backdrops waiting on standby for establishing shots, buying land just to blow up buildings, commandeering military helicopters. Was that something an ordinary person could even dream of? Or buying them just to blow up for fun? Qin Zongyi once again realized Fu Hang's value in the eyes of those powerful figures. This wasn't just a golden son-in-law. This was a dragon son-in-law. I was just thinking, how much would it cost to buy those over there? Fu Hang glanced at Qin Zongyi, craning his neck to look into the distance. The direction he was looking was the Forbidden City. Qin Zongyi's face stiffened. He didn't detect any hint of teasing. Instead, he sensed a strange seriousness from Fu Hang. You're not kidding, are you, kid? Qin Yu-Chu turned back, studying Fu Hang intently, as she too had picked up on the tone of his voice. However, when she saw Fu Hang's face, a peculiar feeling arose within her. The tips of her ears turned inexplicably bright red. Fu Hang was indeed serious. He was genuinely contemplating the matter of the Forbidden City. With his current merits and contributions, if he were to hand over the rewards from Movie King life, ushering in peace for all generations, buying it was naturally impossible. Even if he could buy the White House one day, he couldn't buy this place. Even living there was wishful thinking, a complete fantasy. Even its most famous former resident would have to buy a ticket to get back in. But still, borrowing it for a day shouldn't be a problem, right? If he could get Her Imperial Majesty to wear dragon robes in the Golden Throne Hall. For some reason, Fu Hang's mood suddenly lifted, and his enthusiasm for work surged. Movie King. That title is as good as mine. The quaint, traditional courtyard home, once stepped into, was indeed a world away from its unassuming exterior. The moment Fu Hang crossed the threshold, he truly grasped the sheer opulence of the wealthy. His past poverty, he realized, had severely limited his imagination. In contrast, Qin Yu-chu, who had endured an incredibly harsh and impoverished childhood, acted as if she were genuinely coming home upon returning to this elegant residence. Qin Zongyi and Zhu Biyun were immensely pleased by this. Qin Zongyi also felt a secret sense of satisfaction about his decision to transfer ownership of those 158 milk tea shops to Qin Yu-chu. It was, in fact, a carefully calculated move. For them, 158 shops weren't a particularly significant asset. Moreover, just as Qin Yu-chu had previously analyzed, this milk tea brand had been thoroughly crushed by Ganlu milk tea, leaving it with no power to retaliate. However, Qin Zongyi had done his homework on Fu Hang. He knew about Lee Wei Yang and, later, Shen Qingluan, who had invested. Thus, in his mind, this milk tea brand would be useful to Qin Yu-chu. It was her gateway into Ganlu milk tea. The marketing campaign for the theme song had been a resounding success, allowing Ganlu milk tea to capture a vast market share in a remarkably short period, sending its brand valuation soaring to astonishing heights. But to Qin Zongyi, as a songwriter himself, promoting a hit song in such a manner was incredibly cost-ineffective. He concluded, therefore, that Ganlu milk tea held a different kind of significance for Fu Hang, or perhaps it was part of a larger strategy. And indeed, Qin Yu-chu, despite her lack of affection for the Qin family, readily accepted the 158 shops and, at the first opportunity, made her move into Ganlu milk tea. The fact that Qin Yu-chu had taken the initiative to bring Fu Hang home today was undeniable proof that his gambit had paid off. Such is the nature of capital. A milk tea brand that was initially like a chicken rib, tasteless to keep yet a pity to discard, might even have been an eyesore to Fu Hang. But, utilized from a different angle, it was as if dross had been turned into gold in the blink of an eye. He had masterfully leveraged its potential, turning a near-worthless asset into a tool for maximum profit at minimal cost. Qin Zongyi was very pleased with his maneuvering. Fu Hang sat quietly before a tea table exquisitely carved from Wallamu wood, the scent of an unfamiliar sandalwood incense wafting in the air. He sipped on black tea, reputed to be a limited annual release, yet his mind was still preoccupied with matters of the Golden Throne Hall. That's just how people are. Once a thought takes root, it's difficult to shake off. Qin Yu-chu had been pulled into the kitchen by Zhu Biyun, apparently to prepare a meal herself. Fu Hang observed the taciturn Qin Zongyi, a sense of understanding dawning upon him. Truly, anyone capable of becoming chairman of the Qin Group's board couldn't be simple. There were no nosy relatives as he might have half expected, no grand, dramatic scenes of ancestral acknowledgments and clan reunions often depicted in novels and films. Qin Zongyi even behaved as if there had never been any rift between them. This meeting felt entirely ordinary, a college-aged daughter bringing her boyfriend home for New Year greetings. Within the vast courtyard, only Qin Zongyi and his wife were present. Not even a housekeeper was in sight. This, oddly enough, made Fu Hang slightly uneasy. He'd initially envisioned his trip to the capital as something akin to tackling a high-level dungeon, where he'd lead Yu-chu through a series of trials, overcoming all obstacles, turning the Beijing Qin family upside down, perhaps even unlocking a few side quests. But as things stood, the dramatic scenario of heroic couple wreaks havoc in the capital seemed unlikely to play out. Instead, Fu Hang, just sitting there, felt a growing, subtle awkwardness. A prospective son-in-law, visiting for the first time, and during the new year no less, arriving empty-handed? Fu Hang had come prepared for a confrontation, ready to catch a blade with his bare hands, so to speak. How could he have anticipated such a harmonious scene? Qin Zongyi remained a man of few words. He didn't broach the subjects of work, family, or Fu Hang and Yochu's relationship. He merely commented on the quality of the black tea, the material of the tea table, the variety of the sandalwood. What did Fu Hang know about such things? The small talk was excruciatingly awkward, yet Qin Zongyi seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself. Fu Hang barely managed to endure it until the two emerged from the kitchen. Food and drinks were laid out, and Fu Hang and Qin Zongyi took their seats. It was a small, round table, evidently crafted from some expensive wood. The four of them sat comfortably, without any sense of crowding or unfamiliarity. The atmosphere was surprisingly congenial. The porcelain dishes, bowls, and chopsticks looked exceptionally exquisite, but the food itself was utterly ordinary, simple, home-style dishes. There weren't many, 6 dishes and a soup, plus a mushroom hot pot. Fu Hang, try some. Annie hasn't cooked in years, so I don't know if it's to your liking, Zhu Biyun said, wearing an apron like a typical housewife, showing no trace of her usual domineering businesswoman persona. Of course, it definitely won't be as delicious as what your mother makes. Old Qin, Fu Hang's mother, is an amazing cook. Yuchu will be so fortunate. I stir-fried the garlic greens. Qin Yuchu interjected, winking at Fu Hang. We came in such a hurry, I completely forgot to prepare a gift. I'll drink a glass as a penalty, Fu Hang said, glancing sideways at Qin Yuchu, feeling an increasing wave of awkwardness. Judging by Qin Yuchu's behavior, she seemed to be genuinely falling for the Qin family's act. And it made sense. For someone who hadn't experienced familial warmth for 20 years, the sudden affection from her biological parents was indeed difficult to resist. Besides, her biological parents had consistently shown goodwill, making it hard for Fu Hang to find fault. It was as he always maintained. Whatever Qin Yuchu chose, he would support her unconditionally. Many things fell off, but blood ties were not something one could choose. Fu Hang actually did mention preparing a gift. Qin Yuchu interrupted before Fu Hang could raise his glass, deftly pulling a red envelope from her pocket. But I thought it was too much trouble, and you probably don't lack anything, so I took the liberty of preparing this. Happy New Year! Oh my, why bring gifts when you're just coming home? Zhu Biyun exclaimed, waving her hands with an exaggerated gesture. And why are you giving us a red envelope? It should be us giving one to you. She seemed to suddenly remember something and made to get up and go upstairs. Where I come from, once children start working, they give red envelopes to their elders during New Year, Qin Yuchu said, tilting her head and looking at Zhu Biyun with surprising seriousness. But you're still in school. Zhu Biyun paused, her voice tinged with reproach. But I'm already the CEO of Yuanbu Trading, Director Zhu. Qin Yuchu blinked, her eyelashes fluttering. It's a token of her filial piety. Just accept it, Qin Zongyi said cheerfully, his eyes flickering almost imperceptibly. Fu Hang's heart stirred. He only then realized that Qin Yuchu hadn't addressed either of them as mom or dad since entering. And now, this Director Zhu. It felt particularly pointed. Fu Hang couldn't help but glance at the red envelope Zhu Biyun now held. It was so thin, he'd believe it if someone claimed it was empty. So, had Yuchu given them 100? 50? Or perhaps just 10 yuan? Was she trying to slight them? A thrill of excitement coursed through Fu Hang. Was a new dungeon instance about to begin? However, after accepting the red envelope, Qin Zongyi and his wife showed no sign of anything unusual. They continued to act like loving, doting parents, merely encouraging everyone to eat more, rarely even raising their glasses for a toast. The meal proceeded with an almost unnerving harmony, causing Fu Hang to frequently glance at Yuchu, desperately trying to decipher what on earth she was planning. Fu Hang ate quite a bit. The food wasn't exactly delicious, but it wasn't bad either. He especially polished off the plate of stir-fried greens with garlic. Then, dreading a continuation of the awkward chit-chat about elite affairs, Fu Hang skipped the uniquely shaped coffee table and stood alone in the small courtyard, smoking. Qin Yuchu didn't help clear up either, quietly keeping him company. How much did you put in the red envelope? Fu Hang was curious. Just the red envelope. Qin Yuchu blinked, looped her arms through Fu Hang's, and stood on tiptoe, gazing at the distant forbidden city. Fu Hang pursed his lips and didn't ask further. Buying it would probably be difficult, but renting it, if handled properly, that should be possible, right? Qin Yuchu suddenly whispered. Fu Hang jolted, his fist clenching instinctively. That's Yuchu for you, he thought. She knows what I'm thinking with just a look. If you're really in a hurry, many film studios have one-to-one replicas. We could do a rehearsal first. Ahem. That. We could talk about it later. Fu Hang, a seasoned smoker, choked on a cigarette. Why does it feel like Her Majesty is more enthusiastic about the ascension than I am? The small courtyard exuded a subtle romance indiscernible to outsiders. But in the study, Qin Zongyi and his wife exchanged grave looks. In Zhu Biyun's hand was the red envelope she had just opened. This must be Fu Hang's intention. Qin Zongyi sighed deeply. It's about what I estimated. Based on the market value on the day of the equity transfer, perhaps even a slight premium, Zhu Biyun said, her face also etched with bitterness. Inside the opened red envelope was a check, the amount precisely matching the value of 158 stores. He wasn't accepting their favor. They never imagined this was Fu Hang's purpose in visiting for New Year's. Qin Zongyi's gaze was profound. He couldn't help but recall what Fu Hang had said when he burned the equity transfer agreement worth tens of billions. Whatever Yuchu wants, I'll get it for her. What do we do now? Zhu Biyun's expression was grim, a flicker of regret in her eyes. She genuinely liked this son-in-law. Where else could she find one like him? He perfectly embodied all her hopes for what a son-in-law should be, both personally and professionally. This can't be rushed. Whether he acknowledges it or not, our youngest is still our biological daughter. He can't change that. Qin Zongyi suddenly stood up, opened a cabinet in the study, and took out 2 cartons of cigarettes. What are you doing? Zhu Biyun was puzzled. A return gift, of course. We can't let our son-in-law leave empty-handed, can we? Just this. Zhu Biyun was taken aback. These 2 cartons were quite valuable, a special supply not available on the open market. But compared to the red envelope in her hand, it seemed rather paltry, almost laughably so. It's enough. Qin Zongyi, however, smiled faintly, quickly composing himself. But when he emerged from the room, carrying them in a red plastic bag, his expression froze for a moment. Because in the courtyard, besides Fu Hang and Qin Yuchu, there were 2 more people. Old Pan. A smile bloomed on Qin Zongyi's face as he casually placed the plastic bag by the door. Just taking my granddaughter for a stroll. Saw your gate was open, so we dropped in. This must be Yuchu, right? She looks just like Biyun when she was young. The old man in the courtyard greeted them cheerfully, though his eyes kept darting towards Fu Hang. Beside the old man was a pretty young girl, with delicate features, petite and charming. Hello, Uncle Qin. The young girl was a sweet talker, her voice equally sweet. Chow Chow, you're back. Qin Zongyi's face beamed, but a hint of vigilance flickered in his eyes. Pan Shoujing, the head of the Pan family in the capital. Pan Chow Chow, Pan Shoujing's direct granddaughter. The Pan family and the Qin family weren't exactly close allies among the powerful clans. Due to overlapping business interests, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call them generational rivals. Recently, when Fu Hang had threatened to take on the Qin family, the Pans were the most active, even starting to gather cash flow. Showing up at this time, and with a granddaughter who'd been sent abroad since she was a child. Hello, Uncle Qin. I just got back, and I'm not leaving this time. Abroad is too boring. By the way, Sister Yuchu, I heard you're studying at Hanqing University. How is it? I'm planning to transfer back. I'm already a freshman. Pan Xiao Xiao beamed with youthful exuberance, deep dimples gracing her cheeks. What's your major? Qin Yuchu asked curiously, glancing subtly at Fu Hang. Jewelry design. I'm not very familiar with the School of Arts, Qin Yuchu said with an awkward smile. With a beautiful senior like Sister Yuchu at Hanqing University, the artistic atmosphere must be great. Grandpa, I want to go to Hanqing University, okay? Pan Xiao Xiao suddenly hugged Pan Shoujing's arm, swaying it and wheedling. All right, I'll ask around tomorrow. But I'm telling you, universities here are different from those abroad. You can't just get in because you want to. Pan Shoujing, seemingly unable to resist his granddaughter's coaxing, wore an indulgent expression on his aged face. With Mr. Pan making inquiries, there naturally won't be any problem. Qin Zongyi watched them calmly, his gaze, however, inadvertently sweeping over Fu Hang. Then we'll have to trouble Yuchu to look after her in the future. Pan Shoujing's smile grew even wider. Is this gentleman Sister Yuchu's boyfriend? Pan Xiao Xiao, however, turned her gaze back to Fu Hang. Hello, I'm Yuchu's boyfriend, Fu Hang. Fu Hang greeted her politely. He appeared quite calm, his gaze clear as he looked at Pan Xiao Xiao's sweet smile. The reason was simple. No system pop-up. The Grandmaster was as steady as a rock. From a moment this girl named Pan Xiao Xiao entered, she exuded artifice. Her every expression and gesture, every subtle shift and playful air, Fu Hang sensed it from a distance. The fragrance of her performance was potent, seemingly richer than the Wui De Hong Pao Ti Qin Zongyi had praised for so long. But so what? She hadn't even passed the system's initial screening, a contestant who didn't make it past the auditions. Not worthy of Fu Hang's attention. Hello, brother Fu Hang. Are you also a student at Hanqing University? Pan Xiao Xiao tilted her chin down slightly, appearing a bit shy. I'm planning to take the postgraduate entrance exam for Hanqing University. Fu Hang replied seriously. Wow, that's great. Then we'll be schoolmates in the future. Pan Xiao Xiao suddenly jumped for joy. Fu Hang pursed his lips and sneakily glanced at Qin Yuchu, only to see her standing there composedly, a gentle smile on her face, showing no sign of discomfort. The 2 from the Pan family said their goodbyes and left. Qin Zongyi's face showed no emotion, but a trace of anger rose in his heart. The Pan family really hasn't given up. Are they planning to pull the rug out from under us? That's Pan Shoujing, head of the capital's Pan family, and that's his direct granddaughter. The Pans live just around the corner, neighbors of ours, you could say. Qin Zongyi turned, introducing the Pan family as if making small talk, but his peripheral vision was secretly locked on Fu Hang's expression, observing his reaction. But he was disappointed. Both Fu Hang and Qin Yuchu reacted to the two pans as if they were just ordinary neighbors. A friend gave me these. I don't smoke much myself, so you take them. Qin Zongyi handed over the red plastic bag. Thanks. Fu Hang raised an eyebrow, shot a suspicious glance at Qin Yuchu, took the plastic bag, and casually tucked it under his arm. Fu Hang and Qin Yuchu bid farewell and left. Qin Zongyi didn't try to detain them, not even asking when they were leaving the capital or if they would come over for dinner. This whole meal, everyone had been putting on an act, just playing different roles. You're filming tomorrow? Inside the business Van Baldy Long had arranged in advance. Qin Yuchu tilted her head to look at Fu Hang. Yeah, it should be my last scene. After this, I'll wrap up filming. Fu Hang replied enthusiastically. Having seen the exterior of the Forbidden City, his anticipation for The Raven 3 grew even stronger. Best Actor Award, it's in the bag. Then let's head back. Qin Yuchu leaned against Fu Hang, looking up at his chin. Did you book the plane tickets? Fu Hang asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. This entire trip for Boss Fu had been arranged by Assistant Qin. We'll drive back. A sly glint suddenly flashed in Qin Yuchu's eyes. That's quite a long drive. If we leave now, we'll make it in time, right? Qin Yuchu suddenly raised her voice, asking Baldy Long, who was driving up front. We can get there in just over 6 hours, Baldy Long answered seriously. It'll be tough on you then, Brother Long. Qin Yuchu smiled sweetly, nuzzling her head against Fu Hang's leg. Not all. There are 2 more cars behind us. The guys can take turns driving. Baldy Long glanced at the rearview mirror, then faced forward and raised the partition to the driver's cabin. Fu Hang blinked, looking down earnestly at Qin Yuchu. I checked. The soundproofing in this model is excellent. Qin Yuchu's nimble tongue traced a circle along her upper lip. So, you're the one who booked this van? Fu Hang's pupils dilated slightly. What do you think? Qin Yuchu, still lying down, turned her head inward. Fu Hang pressed his lips together, his nostrils flared, and he took a sharp, cool breath. The van performed exceptionally well, especially with its independent air suspension, making the ride smooth even at high speeds, without a hint of bumpiness. Meanwhile, in that courtyard house, Qin Zongyi and his wife were once again seated in the study. What on earth is the Pan family up to? Zhu Biyun's expression was frosty, that imperious aura of a domineering CEO from the business world resurfacing. What else could it be? They probably found out Fu Hang has many women and want to use that angle. It's also a reminder for us, Qin Zongyi said calmly, holding his teacup. That Pan Xiao Xiao girl. A flicker of disdain crossed Zhu Biyun's face. She's fresh-faced and pretty, sure, but compared to our Yuchu, she's not quite on the same level, is she? But Qin Zongyi merely sipped his tea silently upon hearing this. Pan Xiao Xiao's looks indeed couldn't compare to Yuchu's, but Qin Zongyi was a man and understood men better. Ever since Fu Hang had stopped hiding his affairs, Qin Zongyi had found out a lot. Shen Qingluan, Lee Wei Yang, Zhu Biyun, Ying Yanin, and that finance Ph.D. from overseas. This undoubtedly showed that Fu Hang was a man of broad affections. It made sense. So young, yet so talented and accomplished, how could he possibly resist the temptations of the world? If this was truly the case, Qin Zongyi would actually be more worried. However, Qin Zongyi still couldn't ascertain Qin Yuchu's place in Fu Hang's heart. Fu Hang had spent over $1 billion to promote a girl like Zhu Biyun, and Ying Yanin was an even clearer case. He had directly given Hengyu to Shen Qingluan, and Li Weiyang had founded Ganlu Milk Tea and Weiyang Entertainment. So, Qin Yuchu's Yuanbua trading seemed rather insignificant in comparison. But there was one thing Qin Zongyi now understood. Fu Hang only ever gave to these women. He never sought to gain anything from them. Returning the money for the 158 stores today was the biggest proof. And Ying Yanin. Qin Zongyi had naturally inquired about Ying Yanin's family background. Yet, he had never heard of Fu Hang leveraging any connections from the Ying family. So, this was a man fiercely proud of his own talents. But the more a man was like that, the less likely he was to be tied down by one woman. His daughter was a university student, perhaps with some inherited talent in finance, but compared to those other women, she really had no advantage. His little girl's past experiences meant she was destined to never learn those womanly wiles, the scheming and jealousy. His little girl was still too naive. Qin Zongyi himself had many women on the side. He knew very well the schemes and tactics they were capable of. Compared to them, his little girl's greatest advantage was merely her youth. But a woman doesn't stay 18 forever, though there will always be 18-year-old women. Wasn't Pan Xiao Xiao today just a younger woman than Yuchu? Unfortunately, he and his little girl had acknowledged each other too late. If he rashly interfered in her love life now, it would only backfire. Pan Xiao is just a test. But after Pan Xiao, there will be a Li Xiao, a Zhang Xiao, a Wang Xiao. Qin Zongyi sighed softly. There will always be another. I think Fu Hang cares a lot about our little girl. His visit today was a signal to us and to the outside world. He's let go of the past. But why did he return the money to us? It's to remind us that he only acknowledges our status as her biological parents, not that she's the Miss Qin of the Qin family. Qin Zongyi sighed again, gently placing his teacup down. My Qin family, with its hundreds of billions, does he really look down on it that much? A flicker of doubt crossed Zhu Biyun's face. For someone like him, the Qin family would only be a shackle. Qin Zongyi frowned, lost in thought for a long while before stating his judgment. Zhu Biyun was speechless. Didn't our little girl say today that he transferred Yuanbua to her name? Qin Zongyi suddenly asked. She said she's the executive CEO of Yuanbua now. Have someone check the shareholdings. If he really transferred the shares too, then we'll fully support Yuanbua. Let our little girl build it up, make it so strong that even he can't ignore it, Qin Zongyi said in a low voice, his eyes suddenly focused. If we push too hard, the board of directors, they won't object. They're all old foxes. They can read the situation. Right now, with the wind blowing this way, being on good terms with him is only beneficial. Find a chance to casually mention to your close friends that Pan Xiao has returned to the country and transferred to Hanqing University. Zhu Biyun raised an eyebrow. After a long moment, a look of realization dawned on her face. On the film set, they were in full swing preparing for tomorrow's high-speed car chase. Though called a single scene, it actually involved a multitude of shots. Director Liu, with a decisive wave of his hand, had paused all other non-essential teams and reallocated all resources to this task. Ying Yanin found herself temporarily at leisure, and her parents finally had the chance to seriously scrutinize and interrogate their daughter. You live in a place like this? Old Ying surveyed the simple dwelling, his brow deeply furrowed. This shabby two-bedroom apartment was even more basic than the company-provided staff dormitories. Living in staff dorms before was for work. Wasn't everyone like that? But to still live in such a place after resigning, Old Ying started to feel a pang of heartache for her. Then why don't you spend your money and buy me one? Ying Yanin retorted casually. Her previous income hadn't been enough to support buying a property independently. This apartment was rented. She wasn't particular about her living standards. After quitting her job and moving out of the company dorm, she had simply found a random apartment. Isn't your boyfriend very rich? Get him to buy it. Old Ying was still fuming, feeling like the precious cabbage he had so carefully nurtured had been rooted up by a passing wild boar. However, as soon as these words left his mouth, Ying Yanin over there suddenly fell silent. From the earnest look in her eyes, one could deduce that she was genuinely, very seriously considering this question. Old Ying wanted to slap himself. Stop fooling around. You're not even married. How could you let her buy you a house? Yanin, do you have a complex in mind? Mom has some savings from over the years. I'll buy it for you later, Mother Ying said softly, shooting Old Ying a look. Spring Wind Gardens, Ying Yanin blurted out unexpectedly. Spring Wind Gardens? Mother Ying was taken aback. She hadn't expected her daughter to have already picked out a complex. Yes, it's near Hanqing University, a newly built complex, Ying Yanin replied seriously. This was the complex she had found when she first investigated Qin Yuchu. Fu Hang had settled Qin Yuchu there. Okay. Mom will go help you look at houses later. We'll use the New Year holiday to help you move. Joy showed on Mother Ying's face. Her daughter had really changed, starting to develop material desires. It was true what they said. Women really did change when they fell in love. As Mother Ying mused, her gaze fell on the bed in the bedroom. The quilt, folded as neatly as a block of tofu, didn't seem so annoying anymore. Yanin, what has Fu Hang been busy with these days? Seeing Old Ying silent, and fearing the father and daughter would start bickering again, Mother Ying quickly asked. He's probably preparing for filming. Tomorrow's a big scene. It seems even the P14 has been brought in, Ying Yanin answered honestly. P420? Is that kid crazy? How dare he? Who approved it? Old Ying suddenly blew his top. Due to professional habit, he was particularly sensitive to such matters. How would I know? Ying Yanin glanced at her father innocently. You're just going to let him mess around like that? I'm just an actress. Old Ying was at a loss for words, his eyes darting around in anger. He hesitantly took out his phone, unsure for a moment whether he should make the call. However, the phone in his hand rang. Chen Xiao. Old Ying squinted and walked aside to answer the call. A big leader is visiting Hanqing. Why didn't you give me a heads up? Shen Xiao's teasing voice came through the phone. Outside of work hours, these old comrades in arms, who had been through life and death together, didn't bother with formalities. If you have something to say it. Olding was very annoyed. Come out for a drink. No, time. I want to introduce someone to you. I said I'm busy. He's the current top dog in Hanqiang. Shen Xiao's tone was playful. Old Ing fell silent. He naturally knew who the current leader of Hanqiang's underworld was. Not long ago, he had personally led a raid on their gambling den. Give me the address. After a long pause, Old Ing sighed in resignation. Perfect. He could ask Shen Xiao, the branch bureau chief, face-to-face if he knew about the P14 situation in his jurisdiction. Going out, Mother Ing asked, seeing Old Ing pick up his jacket. It's Shen Xiao. He knows I'm in Hanqiang and wants to meet. Old Ing held his jacket, his gaze inadvertently falling on the gauze on Ing Yanan's face again. For some reason, when his daughter was a police officer and got shot in the stomach, alongside the heartache, he felt a sense of pride. Which police officer wasn't born to parents? There was no reason his, Old Ying's, daughter couldn't take a bullet. But after his daughter resigned, she was no longer a police officer. This facial injury, however, pained him to death. He wished he could just take out everyone in the film crew. Chen Xiao. Oh, right, I saw Changfeng yesterday. Mother Ing suddenly remembered something and said casually. As soon as she said this, both Ing Yanan's and Old Ying's expressions changed, and they even exchanged a knowing glance. Duan Changfeng, Old Ing probed. Yes, in Yanan's film crew, but he seemed to be limping, Mother Ing recalled carefully. He's a partner of Wei Yang Entertainment and has shares in several film studios. Ing Yanan glanced at Old Ing and explained timidly. Oh, doing pretty well for himself, huh? But those people around him. Mother Ing had also spent most of her life within the system. Her judgment of people was quite sharp. After Changfeng left the army, he spent a few years abroad. I only recently heard about it. All right, he's not worrying about food or clothing now, so let's not needlessly concern ourselves. Everyone chooses their own path. Old Ing hesitated for a moment, then spoke coldly. Sigh, what pity. Among your comrades, I had the highest hopes for Changfeng. But then again, he did save your life back then. As long as it's not a matter of principle, if you can help him, you should. Mother Ing sighed deeply, but couldn't help reminding him. Her old husband was so rigid in everything he did. She didn't want people talking behind his back. All right, you stay and accompany Yanan. I'll just go for a bit and be back. Old Ing sighed inwardly and turned to leave. Some things couldn't be spoken of, not even to his wife of decades, with whom he'd shared so much. Back then, he couldn't resist taking his daughter for a meeting, and it nearly caused a disaster. The meeting place, surprisingly, was Brother Haonan's food stall, but not at the outdoor stall, rather in a small private room on the second floor. When Old Ing pushed the door open, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes, because inside sat 3 people. Besides the expected Chen Xiao and Old Duan, there was also a man in a trench coat with a cigarette dangling from his lips. You smoke too. Old Ing subconsciously closed the door tightly and checked that the curtains were drawn properly. If I weren't afraid you'd get disciplined, do you think I'd care to sit here during the new year? The man in the trench coat shot Old Ing a look. Watch your mouth. I'm a rank and a half higher than you. You should stand up and salute. Old Ying's temper flared up immediately. Smack. The man in the trench coat slapped a document onto the table. Leader, please read the terms carefully. After confirming there are no errors, please sign. You should be clear on the procedure, but for the sake of work rigor, please be thorough. As the man in the trench coat spoke, he began to meticulously recite the articles of some regulation. Old Ing was completely dumbfounded. This was actually a confidentiality agreement? So now I even have to sign a confidentiality agreement just to have a drink with you all? He looked at the dead serious man in the trench coat, then at Duan Changfeng, who sat with his head bowed, and silently complied with the procedure, carefully and meticulously signing his name and adding his fingerprint. What on earth is going on? Old Ying's face was grave, because he had seen Fu Hang's name on the confidentiality agreement. Didn't I tell you? Because of Yanan's relationship and your position, I was worried you might abuse your authority and make a mistake. The man in the trench coat carefully put away the document, placing it cautiously into a manila envelope. What's that kid's background, really? Old Ing looked at their serious expressions, his gaze gradually sharpening. You should already know about the Golden Triangle and the overseas financial markets. The man in the trench coat took out another cigarette and put it to his lips, but hesitated when about to light it. Doctor's orders were to smoke less. What exactly was the daily limit again? Old Ing said nothing, took a cigarette from Old Duan, and lit it. Jack Solomon was also his doing. The man in the trench coat ultimately didn't light his cigarette, silently putting it back in the pack. Old Ying's eyes narrowed. So it really is related to him. No wonder. He's making a movie, being so high-profile about it. People have even been asking me about it. Old Ying pursed his lips resentfully. Because of Ing Yanin, some people had indeed come to sound him out. However, before the smirk on Old Ying's lips could fade, he suddenly noticed that Chen Xiao, who had been chattering away like a motor mouth, had a strange expression. Don't tell me. Those 4 ghost shadows were because of him, too. Chen Xiao's expression suddenly became very calm. He picked up the Zisha teapot from the table and composedly poured Old Ying a cup of tea. Now you understand our concerns? The man in the trench coat picked up his thermos but didn't drink directly from it. Instead, he poured some into the teacup in front of him. Hold on. Old Ying naturally understood Chen Xiao's gesture. He picked up his teacup, drained it in one gulp, and stubbed out the cigarette he had just taken a puff from. Don't tell me that kid was responsible for the catfish incident too? Old Ying's lips twitched. Huh? You didn't know? I submitted the report according to procedure. Chen Xiao was stunned. He looked suspiciously at old Duan and the man in the trench coat. He had made the interrogation record for the mutual combat incident very detailed. Outsiders might not pay attention, but old Ying, who had clearly taken notice of Fu Hang, couldn't possibly have missed that file. Could he? I intercepted it. The man in the trench coat pursed his lips. A certain degree of caution was always necessary. Old Ying's expression grew increasingly strange. He subconsciously picked up the cigarette he had just stubbed out from the ashtray. Chen Xiao obsequiously lit it for him. Sure enough, as the cigarette was relit, Old Ying seemed to process things. I remember, you have a son, right? He asked Chen Xiao, his face a mask of disbelief. Chen Xiao pressed his lips together, trying to suppress a laugh, but the man in the trench coat couldn't help but roar with laughter. Only old Duan looked momentarily as if he'd swallowed a fly. Fortunately, old Ying's attention was entirely on Chen Xiao, so he didn't notice old Duan's expression. Don't even get me started. Knowing that kid's usual antics, I'm starting to wonder if I have an illegitimate daughter I don't even know about, Chen Xiao said, his face full of mock lament. Old Ying was utterly speechless. This Chen Xiao, when he was a soldier, it was as if he was divinely protected. Forget other comrades. Even among the few in this room, all from the same company, they had faced life-and-death situations multiple times. Who among them didn't have a few bullet scars? Only Chen Xiao. Bullets seemed to bend around him. The only time he got injured was during training when a comrade tripped him and he sprained his ankle. The higher-ups had discussed Chen Xiao's promotion with him. Old Ying, had been happy to switch posts to make room for his old brother, Chen Xiao. But why the hell was he, Old Ying, thinking about Chen Xiao's earlier comment, suddenly so unhappy? Is this my son-in-law we're talking about? The room fell into a brief silence. The men smoked quietly, waiting for Old Ying to process the information. The procedures within the system were strict. Even though Old Ying held a high position, he couldn't find out about things he wasn't supposed to know, no matter how he tried. Old Ying finally understood why these men had wanted to bring him here as soon as he arrived in Hansheng. Given his temper, if he hadn't known beforehand, he might have really made a mistake. Ever since his daughter resigned from the police force, Old Ying had belatedly realized that Ing Yanin was his only daughter. Some things were ingrained in their very bones. When you wore the uniform, you were a comrade. We shared common beliefs and duties. But when you took off the uniform, became a civilian, and shed that aura of glory, only then could they see the other things they had previously overlooked. What did your wife tell you? Seeing Old Ying still frowning, Duan Chongfeng smiled and changed the subject. This was the second purpose of today's meeting. She asked me to persuade you to pull back from the brink. Old Ying gave Duan Chongfeng a bitter, exceptionally complex look. Then why don't you try persuading me? Duan Chongfeng's eyebrows shot up. What kind of look is that? Like you think I owe you something? Just wait until you find out the kid who's charmed your girl is my son. Then you can look at me like that. If I tried, would you even listen? Old Ying chuckled, not noticing anything amiss. Maybe. Old Duan nodded seriously. Old Ying was momentarily stunned. Damn it, that performance art incident, was that kid behind that too? Your brain these days? You really should retire. Duan Chongfeng shot Old Ying a disdainful glance. Old Ying opened his mouth, but, for a moment, couldn't refute it. Right. Ghost Shadow was caught around that time. So, old Duan has a daughter too? No, didn't your daughter pass away? That girl couldn't be Fu Hang's kid, could she? So, what are you going to do? The man in the trench coat looked between Old Ying and old Duan and spoke meaningfully. Old Ying fell silent. He naturally understood the question. What was he going to do about Ing Yanin and Fu Hang? Let me give you some advice, old Duan suddenly said with sincerity. Yanin enjoys acting now. She's very serious about it. After she finishes this film, take her back to Beijing. With your connections, it wouldn't be hard for her to continue in the entertainment industry. His own son had gone after his sworn brother's daughter. If the two genuinely ended up together, he would naturally be happy to see it. But Fu Hang's situation? It left him speechless facing his old brother. It felt like even a life-saving debt of gratitude couldn't stop this. That girl, Yanin? A melancholic expression suddenly appeared on old Ying's face. He was also very clear about his own daughter's situation, especially after she resigned. Old Ying's fatherly love gradually reawakened, and he finally realized that Yanin's current situation was greatly related to him. He was a good soldier, a good cop, but he wasn't a good father. In this respect, everyone present was quite similar, except for Qin Xiao. That lucky bastard. His son took after his wife and became a university lecturer. She's acting more like a woman now. It's good for her to be in a serious relationship for once, even if it's with a player. After a long pause, Olding sighed magnanimously. Qin Xiao's eyes widened, while the man in the trench coat gave old Duan a meaningful look. Old Duan choked, whether on tea or smoke. It wasn't clear, and coughed for a long time. Are you serious? She's your only daughter. Old Duan, having caught his breath, couldn't help but ask. What else can I do? Arrest her? Lock her up? Or go beat up that kid and threaten him to leave Yanin? Old Ing suddenly flared up. You all rushed to corner me here precisely to prevent that kind of thing from happening, didn't you? What's Yanin's temper like now? She's already run away from home twice. Whose kid only starts rebelling in their mid-20s? You haven't seen her 13th sister phase, have you? If you really push her too far, she might actually go find some gang to join. He's just a player. Once he's done playing, it'll be over. In the one day he'd been in Hanqiang, he had actually found out more than his wife. That damn kid, he might be a player, but he truly treats Yanin well. That roast duck last night, you might not even be able to get something like that in Beijing. You can't get a reservation as a private citizen, but if he went in uniform, he'd lose face. That kid has quite a few women, you know. Old Duan felt he couldn't let his old comrade, his old company commander, give up like this. You all said it yourselves, that kid is a great hero. In terms of merit, he's no less accomplished than you or me. What if Yanin can make him settle down? Old Ing suddenly lifted his chin, displaying the same commanding presence he had when leading the elite dagger company. Fear no hardship. Forge ahead against the odds. Qin Xiao couldn't help but clap, but his eyes held a playful, knowing look. He'd been in charge of security arrangements recently, so he was all too familiar with Fu Hang's situation. Good grief, Spring Breeze Gardens was practically turning into the Sinang Palace. Lu Hong, you know, the supermarket owner? She's actually the archives administrator. She used to be as tight-lipped as a martyr, but now she's cracking sunflower seeds and gossiping all day, even leading that young lad transferred from internal affairs astray. The man in the trench coat's expression grew increasingly odd, especially the way he looked at Duan Changfeng. It was pure schadenfreude. The fact that Fu Hang was old Duan's son was known by very few people. Its secrecy level was even higher than Catfish 4, and even Qin Xiao wasn't aware. You want Yanin to go fight for favor? Old Duan was dumbfounded. You've got some nerve. Get that boy to settle down. Even I, his old man, wouldn't dare to think about it. Okay? You, a mere grunt. How many women have you even met? With Yanin's temperament, she wouldn't last 3 episodes in a palace intrigue drama. Why not? How is my Yanin any worse than them? Olding seemed to be getting riled up. Who are you looking down on? Yanin was the campus belle at the police academy, all right? If she hadn't put that boy who confessed to her with flowers in public in the hospital with a whip kick, the line of guys chasing her would have circled the athletic field. Lana, Katrina, you know her, right? The man in the trench coat reminded him weakly. What's wrong with a foreign girl? Olding was unconvinced. He naturally had a file on this foreign girl. That's Catfish 4. Old Duan suddenly spoke seriously. Old Ying's raised smile froze on his face. The left corner of his lip twitched erratically at a very unnatural angle. His left eyelid also twitched in a way that defied biological norms, medically explained as an intermittent, involuntary clonic spasm of the orbicularis oculi muscle and facial nerve, controlled by the brain. Catfish. The vocal technique Olding used for these 2 words was also noteworthy. In vocal music, it's known as a low-frequency tremor, a very advanced skill. MHM, the one that blew up Apocalypse. The man in the trench coat patted the briefcase beside him and pulled out a corner of the manila envelope he had just placed inside. Old Ying's gaze followed to the non-disclosure agreement he had just signed, and he instantly fell silent. How was Catfish involved in this too? Speaking of which, what on earth was this kid trying to do? Letting his daughter go fight for favor and experience the ways of the world was one thing, but letting his daughter compete with catfish for a man? You're just letting a catfish run wild within our borders? Olding suddenly looked at the man in the trench coat with a serious expression. From a macroscopic perspective, this is a defected catfish, wanted by hostile forces, who has been taken in and settled. The man in the trench coat replied with equal seriousness. Olding fell silent again. Indeed, from a broader strategic view, a visible and controllable catfish was far better than an unseen one. He didn't press the man in the trench coat further about his plans. He knew his limits. So, those people around Yanin, it's because of catfish. Old Ying's brow furrowed. Yanin had undercover guards. He'd noticed them on the set yesterday. He just wasn't sure which department they were from. Not exactly. Those measures were requested by Fu Hang to protect his family. Chen Qiao shrugged, emphasizing the word family quite heavily. Old Ying silently lit another cigarette. Damn it, her own father had never even thought of this, and instead sent his daughter to the front lines to face bullets. And that scumbag had arranged a higher level of protection than he, her father, had. He didn't even get this kind of treatment outside of work hours. There are 3 teams following Yanin. One was arranged by Chen Xiao, one was sent by my side, and the remaining few were arranged by Fu Hang himself. The man in the trench coat reminded him calmly, seeing Old Ying silent. Since Old Ying had figured it out, he might as well not hide it from him to avoid any misunderstandings later. What's the big deal about catfish? It's not like it's a contest of combat and assassination. A foreign woman. Is Fu Hang actually going to marry her? Old Ying pursed his lips, trying to sound tough. But deep down, Old Ying still felt he needed to have a good talk with Yanin. All right, I get the rest. Old Ying drained his teacup in one gulp and prepared to leave. Although he knew meticulous arrangements must have been made here, meeting old Duan privately, given his status, was ultimately risky. Old Duan seemed to sense this sentiment and took a deep look at his old company commander. Oh, right. You're familiar with the Hanqing area. I want to buy an apartment for Yanin. As Old Ying stood up, he turned to look at Chen Xiao. Oh, Chen Xiao was taken aback. Was this Old Ying for real? What about Spring Breeze Gardens? Do you know anyone there? Old Ying asked impatiently. The room fell silent again. What's wrong? Old Ying sensed the strangeness. Don't bother looking elsewhere. I have an apartment in Spring Breeze Gardens. I'll sell it to you. Old Duan licked his lips and said quietly, Since I can't stop you, then let your Yanin go and get a good taste of palace scheming. You have an apartment in Spring Breeze Gardens? Old Ying asked suspiciously. MHM, Building 12, Unit 210. It's not on a high floor, but it gets great light. Zhuge Yun from Yanin's company lives across the hall. They get along well, Old Duan said, his tone playful. Old Ying raised an eyebrow. And don't worry about the transfer or anything. The apartment is registered under one of my underlings' names. It won't trace back to me. Old Duan glanced at the man in the trench coat and said with a serious and solemn expression, I get the feeling there's something up with this Spring Breeze Gardens. Shen Qingluan, Qin Yuchu, Zhuge Yun Lana, Katrina all live there, and your future in-law, Fu Hang's mother. So, security is definitely not an issue, Chen Xiao, suppressing a laugh, quietly added. Of course, if you're still worried, you can send more people. To be honest, we're a bit short-handed lately. The man in the trench coat thought for a moment and weakly reminded him again. Old Ying stood there, mouth agape, momentarily unsure what else to ask. Are scumbags these days so brazenly scummy? His in-law lives there too? What kind of family is this? After a long pause, Old Ying silently opened the door. That king of soldiers G-phone, was he fake too? Just before leaving, Old Ying suddenly turned around. The 3 people in the room exchanged glances and remained silent. Meanwhile, on the highway from the capital to Hacheng, a convoy of 3 luxury cars pulled into a service area. Baldy Long opened the driver's door, scurried halfway around the car like a lackey, and pushed open the rear passenger door. Yu Chu, gathering her long hair, stepped out of the car. She gave a seductive glance back into the car before elegantly walking towards the service area. 2 men got out of the car behind them and, along with Nian Bing, silently followed her. Fu Hang poked his head out, looking a bit listless, his gaze towards Baldy Long, who stood as still and expressionless as a javelin, was tinged with awkwardness and a strange feeling. Even though he knew the car was well soundproofed, Baldy Long must have been well aware of what had just happened. After all, they hadn't said a word, yet Baldy Long had tacitly raised the partition to the driver's cabin. Was this the depravity of a capitalist? But to be honest, the experience was good. There was a strange kind of thrill to it. Take this. Fu Hang turned around and, from inside the car, pulled out the 2 cartons of cigarettes he'd swiped from Qingzongi. Thanks, boss. Baldy Long, however, wasn't the least bit reserved, respectfully taking them with both hands. This gesture made Fu Hang's lips twitch again. You joker, were you really a debt collector in the past? Or did you actually awaken some incredible system? Baldy Long acted as if nothing was out of the ordinary, which considerably eased Fu Hang's underlying awkwardness. Then, he subconsciously glanced towards the bustling service area and easily spotted that elegant figure among the crowd. She really is different every day. As a partner, Yu Chu is simply perfect without a single flaw. I wonder where these top students learn all this. It seems that besides talent, good study materials are crucial for academic improvement. If it weren't for the fact that they'd indeed street raced for hours and gotten their first duo win in that hotel whose name he couldn't recall, Fu Hang would have doubted Yu Chu's real experiences. Speaking of which, can one really read extensively in those so-called private clubs? For some reason, Fu Hang suddenly had a strong urge to go and see for himself the female body nourishing and sculpting beauty center that Yu Chu had bought. Leaning against the car door and smoking silently, Fu Hang replayed the details of the battle he had just experienced in his mind. A qualified competitor needs to be good at summarizing and reviewing. He remembered his high school homeroom teacher emphasizing that to improve, a mistake notebook was essential. Lately, he increasingly felt he was truly slacking off. Not only had his professional abilities declined, but even his combat skills couldn't keep up with Yu Chu's progress. No matter. Fu Hang's thoughts then drifted to the year-end gift package in the warehouse. It had been almost 48 hours since he received the reward, and Fu Hang had managed to resist opening it for the lottery draw. He had a strange sense of anticipation for this reward, but after seeing the Forbidden City, that anticipation grew even stronger. He hadn't dared to think about it before, but since Actor's life had given a hint, it meant anything was possible. Just thinking about that kind of experience made his blood pump. When they left just now, he hadn't had Baldy Long get directly onto the highway, but instead had him drive a lap around the Forbidden City. Men of this era didn't really yearn for mandated by heaven, may you live long and prosper. Everyone understood that era was long gone, but they eagerly pursued the fringe benefits that came with what mandated by heaven, may you live long and prosper represented. Try a draw. What if it could bring it forward? Fu Hang looked up at the clear, vast sky. It really was a beautiful day. System, lottery draw. Fu Hang grit his teeth and silently chanted this mantra in his mind. A roulette wheel abruptly appeared before his eyes, and the familiar wheel began to spin. Fu Hang remained silent, leaning lazily against the car door, appearing very relaxed. Thank you for your patronage, +1. Looking at the static interface, Fu Hang's mouth twitched. He felt like he'd been ruthlessly mocked by the system again. It was clearly a very useful skill, so why did it seem so glaringly offensive? +1, who was it looking down on? During the 3-hour drive, he'd used it once in the car. Fu Hang felt insulted, but he couldn't refute it. But when the large golden words, "Thank you for your patronage, +1," disappeared and a line of explanation appeared, Fu Hang's eyes froze. Thank you for your patronage can be used on a conquest target, with the same effect. Conditions for use. Target's affection level 90% or above, and Stage 2 conquest mission initiated. Current uses, 1. After use, extra uses permanently -1. Method of use, XXO. What's going on? One-time use? Use on a client? XXO? Fu Hang licked his lips, his gaze starting to lose focus. I've been wholeheartedly dreaming of bringing lasting peace to the world. And you give me this? Why do I feel like the system is getting more and more inappropriate? What is this for? Ensuring customer experience? That makes sense. Not every woman is Qin Yu Chu. No, I wasn't even thinking about that, okay? Fu Hang irritably stubbed out his cigarette and unconsciously scanned the crowd. Nian Bing's tall figure stood outside the restrooms. Qin Yu Chu had gone in and hadn't come out yet. Fu Hang subconsciously glanced at Baldy Long, only to see him with a cigarette dangling from his lips, covering his phone with his hand while making a call. Should be back tonight. Probably won't make it for dinner. Yeah, wait for me at home. Fu Hang's ears twitched. Oh, that tone. Baldy Long's in love. Who were you talking to? Fu Hang asked playfully when Baldy Long hung up. My wife, Baldy Long said with an embarrassed smile. Wife? You're married? Fu Hang's eyes widened as he looked Baldy Long up and down. Not yet, just. Get used to calling her that. Baldy Long chuckled, his normally fierce smile looking a bit sleazy. Fu Hang subconsciously licked his lips again. Wife? Yeah. Young people these days call each other husband and wife so casually, even little kids who haven't fully matured yet like to say it. Little do they know, it's easy to call someone wife, but to call someone old lady, as in one you've grown old with, takes a man's entire life. Baldy Long didn't know why Fu Hang suddenly seemed melancholic. He looked puzzled, his posture unconsciously less upright. Do you know the meaning of wife? Fu Hang suddenly asked. Huh. Baldy Long was taken aback. It begins with Yu Lao, the god of matchmaking, and ends with Meng Pa, the lady of forgetfulness. That's the journey of a Laupa wife. Fu Hang looked up, his gaze deep as he looked at Baldy Long. Baldy Long was completely baffled. That's so philosophical, so profound, so touching. But boss, is it appropriate for you to say that? So, is that why you always call them Boss Lady 2, Boss Lady 3, by their names? Fu Hang met Baldy Long's astonished gaze, and, damn it, he suddenly understood the look in his eyes. Damn brute. As expected of someone who didn't finish college. Looks like I need to find a chance to make this guy take a few more elective courses. Suddenly, he started to miss President Xia. If it were Xia Xiaofeng, he definitely wouldn't have shown such an expression. He might even have taken out a small notebook to jot down that classic line. Tell me about this wife of yours. How did you two meet? Fu Hang changed the subject and lit another cigarette. Actually, boss, you've probably met her. She's the former receptionist from Ganlu Milk Tea. Seeing Fu Hang ask, Baldy Long didn't hide anything and answered honestly. Huh, the receptionist. Fu Hang raised an eyebrow, instinctively recalling those black stockings that were always posed so strikingly. Speaking of which, did Xia Xiaofeng and that Lu Ru get together? He was fawning over her pretty seriously back then. Yes, her name is Lu Ru, Baldy Long replied cheerfully. Fu Hang's smile froze on his face. Lu Ru? Fu Hang seriously scrutinized Baldy Long. The one who really liked wearing black stockings? Fu Hang's tone was probing. The boss really remembers her, Baldy Long beamed, sharing in the perceived honor. A woman the boss remembers. Seems my taste isn't bad. How did you two get together? Fu Hang asked, stunned. The reason I remember her isn't because she liked black stockings. Didn't you say it, boss? If you've got the rice, a clever woman will come to sing your praises. Baldy Long proudly lifted his chin. Fu Hang's eyes twitched. That's not the point, is it? The point is, wasn't Xia Xiaofeng simping for that receptionist, Lu Ru? You know, he used to be a security guard, and Xia Xiaofeng is now the CEO of Wei Yang Entertainment. No, that's not right. You're my personal assistant now. When you compare yourself to CEO Xia of Wei Yang Entertainment, it's really hard to say who's in a better position. You must have a lot of women. Fu Hang suddenly felt it was unfair to Xia Xiaofeng. Simps really do get the short end of the stick. Those girls from before. How could they even compare to Lu Ru? Dragon, however, suddenly looked up with a sigh, and the way he gazed at the blue sky gave Fu Hang a faintly familiar feeling. Damn it, this was the unmistakable aura of a simp. You, a guy named Dragon. Aren't you supposed to be some kind of epic hero? Boss, you know, in my old circles, there was never a shortage of women. But most of them were nightclub types. Where'd I ever get the chance to meet a girl from a respectable family like Lu Ru? Dragon suddenly lowered his head, glancing at Fu Hang with gratitude. In that instant, a scene from Young and Dangerous inexplicably flashed through Dragon's mind. That touching love story between Honam and the tutor. Fu Hang's palms grew a little sweaty. The impression Lu Ru gave him was that she was in a completely different league than the girls Dragon was talking about. But seeing the sincerity in Dragon's eyes, he couldn't bring himself to say it. It's not like all nightclub girls are. Fu Hang began, choosing his words carefully, feeling like Dragon desperately needed a reality check. Boss, don't make fun of me. We all know the deal with nightclub girls. Dragon interrupted, a rare occurrence, his face full of emotion. Boss, I get what you're saying. Not every girl working in those places wants to be there. It's always the same story. Father's a gambler, mother's sick, little brother needs money for school. Dragon lit a cigarette, seeming a bit more relaxed, perhaps because he rarely discussed such topics with Fu Hang. Fu Hang's lip twitched, his eyes discreetly scanning the crowd in the distance. I have a feeling you're indirectly referring to me. And haven't you forgotten you were originally planning to force Nian Bing into that life? Are you sure you want to go down this road? Nian Bing. Forget me. Even you probably couldn't order her around now. For no apparent reason, Fu Hang's gaze drifted to Dragon's shin. I'm not saying those nightclub girls are no good. Everyone makes mistakes, goes astray sometimes. Like me, Dragon suddenly looked at Fu Hang, his gaze deep, filled with gratitude and admiration. That look made Fu Hang instantly drop the idea of reminiscing with Nian Bing about the past. Once girls get mixed up in those places, it's very hard for them to get out. It's not that those experiences can't be forgotten, but their whole value system gets completely twisted. Dragon, oblivious to Fu Hang's complicated expression and unaware that his own display of gratefulness had just saved his shin from a potential injury, suddenly sounded extremely melancholic. This made Fu Hang realize that the simp standing before him had his own untold story. Once they've experienced making over 10,000 in a single night from table fees and drink commissions, once they've seen a single bottle of alcohol or a VIP booth go for hundreds of thousands, they can't just go back to a normal 9-to-5 job earning a few thousand a month, let alone settling down with a man who only makes a modest salary to support himself and a family. When they've seen countless men with an arm around their waist, calling their wives to say they're working overtime, it becomes very hard for them to believe in love or marriage. When they go home for the holidays and find that their super smart classmates from school are earning way less than they are, they stop believing that knowledge changes your life or that hard work brings riches. Dragon continued smoking, his voice growing even more melancholic. His hazy eyes even seemed to hold a trace of profound, world-weary compassion, which startled Fu Hang. What in the world did you go through? You're a debt collector. You've probably forced plenty of women into that life yourself, haven't you? Or you really want to talk? So you think this Lu Ru is different from them? Fuang weakly prodded again. Hith. Dragon suddenly let out a laugh that was meant to sound naive and sincere. Damn, Fu Hang thought, that fierce grin of his is looking way too familiar. Dude, I think your nose just fell off. Aren't you going to pick it up? How did it start between you two? Fu Hang licked his lips, a nervous habit, while mentally trying to pinpoint where Xia Xiaofeng was going wrong in comparison. Remember the company dinner before the new year? With that bunch of cowards from Unit 010? I got wasted that night. I don't know how, but Lu Ru just happened to be passing by. And those idiots, God knows what possessed them, actually asked her to take me home. And then you two. Fu Hang's lips trembled. You were totally set up. No, not that night. I was completely hammered. Ru took care of me at my place all night. She changed my clothes, even gave me a sponge bath. Boss, you know my apartment. It's usually a total pigsty. The next morning, I woke up, and my bedroom was as neat as a hotel suite. Then I saw her in the kitchen, her back to me, making porridge. That's when I knew. I'd found the one. Dragon actually showed a rare trace of bashfulness. Fu Hang opened his mouth, then closed it, momentarily unsure how to respond. A minute ago, you were philosophizing like some world-weary sage who'd seen it all, and now you're acting like a blushing virgin? One bowl of porridge, and you're completely smitten? Boss, you have no idea. I used to bring girls home all the time. They'd leave their things scattered around. But that day, Lu Ru didn't ask a single question. She just gathered all that stuff, sorted it neatly, and put each item into a separate plastic bag. Right then, I knew it was time to say goodbye to my old ways. Fu Hang's lip twitched again. What a classic move. So then, you had her move in with you? Of course not. Lu Ru isn't like that. Besides, my place is a dump. It's not good enough for her. It's tainted. Dragon's voice suddenly grew heavy, his eyes fixed on the floor, a flicker of deep regret in them. I bought her an apartment. You bought her an apartment? Well, boss, you've been very generous lately, and I had some savings. Dragon shot another grateful look at Fu Hang before turning to watch Xin Yuchu approach, a gentle smile on her face. Fu Hang blinked, his eyes also following Xin Yuchu. Hold on, Dragon. Our situations are totally different, right? For me, buying an apartment is like a few days' income. But you probably used up your entire life savings. What are you two discussing that's so amusing? Xin Yuchu asked, smiling, though her eyes held a hint of suspicion as she looked at them. Oh, nothing. Are you hungry? Want to grab something to eat before we head off? Fu Hang asked considerately. Let's get a bowl of noodles. Xin Yuchu's gaze swept over the men. She wasn't hungry, having eaten her fill earlier, but it was a different story for the guys doing all the driving. They found a noodle place at the service stop and settled in, each ordering their meal. Fu Hang and Xin Yuchu shared a table, while Dragon and Yin Bing sat at a distance. The other men also paired off, subtly forming a protective ring around Fu Hang and Xin Yuchu. While eating his noodles, Fu Hang found his gaze drifting involuntarily to Dragon. Xia Xiaofeng and Dragon. They're my most crucial guys. Mulling this over, Fu Hang pulled out his phone and dialed Xia Xiaofeng. Boss. Xia Xiaofeng picked up almost instantly. Happy New Year, Fu Hang offered, a somewhat automatic pleasantry. Xia Xiaofeng sounded momentarily stunned. The film crew was on a tight schedule, and he, as the executive in charge of all coordination, had completely forgotten it was the new year. All right, Happy New Year. Boss, are you back? When you get to the set, everything's ready on this end. After his brief confusion, Xia Xiaofeng snapped right back into work mode. I'll be there around evening, Fu Hang said with a helpless sigh, feeling an unexpected twinge of guilt. Understood. I'll make the arrangements immediately. Will you be eating at the set, or will you have dinner before you arrive? I'll eat before I get there. Don't worry about me. Just let Director Liu and the others know I'll drop by tonight. Yes, sir, Xia Xiaofeng replied, his tone exceptionally crisp. Setting that aside for a moment, I need to ask you something. Has a receptionist at Sweet Dew Milk Tea been replaced? Fu Hang chose his words carefully. The more professional and dedicated Xia Xiaofeng sounded, the more Fu Hang felt compelled to get a clear answer on this. However, when Fu Hang asked this question, Xia Xiaofeng suddenly fell silent. Boss, are you asking about Lu Ru? After a moment, Xia Xiaofeng tentatively ventured, his voice weak. Yes, I went over earlier, but I don't think I saw her. Fu Hang probed indirectly. I transferred her to the HR department of Wei Yang Entertainment, Xia Xiaofeng said softly after another moment of silence. Fu Hang's forehead twitched, and he sighed heavily inwardly. Damn it, I knew it. Boss, her educational background isn't great, but she's very dedicated to her work. Seeing Fu Hang silent, Xia Xiaofeng hurriedly explained. He didn't have any wild guesses about why Fu Hang had suddenly asked about Lu Ru. He was very clear about the kind of women the boss usually got involved with. Although Lu Ru was pretty, she wasn't in the same league at all. You're the CEO. Personnel appointments are your call. You know that's not what I'm asking about. Fu Hang pursed his lips. The HR department, such a familiar place. We're doing pretty well. Xia Xiaofeng's tone suddenly became awkward. Fu Hang's mouth twitched again. Just as I thought. You know about her and Baldy Long, right? Better to rip the Band-Aid off quickly. Fu Hang felt it was best to be direct. Simps needed the world's kindness and care, especially these unlucky ones without any plot armor. However, the other end of the line went silent again. Fu Hang slapped his forehead. Xiaoru mentioned to me that Brother Long might be interested in her. But don't worry, boss. I won't let my personal life affect my work. Please trust that I can handle it. Xia Xiaofeng suddenly replied with unusual seriousness. Fu Hang, holding the phone, stared blankly at Baldy Long in the distance, who was slurping noodles loudly. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. See you tonight. Fu Hang silently hung up the phone. He realized this matter couldn't be clarified over the phone. But even if they met in person, what could he say? What's wrong? Qin Yuchu put down her phone and asked curiously. The Minister of Rights and the commander of the Embroidered Guard are fighting over a famous courtesan. Whose side would you take? Fu Hang rolled his eyes and sighed helplessly. Little Xia. Qin Yuchu raised an eyebrow, glanced at Baldy Long in the distance, and understood instantly. That woman's playing a high-level game. Fu Hang stared at his noodle soup, his eyes profound. Meanwhile, Qin Yuchu fluttered her long eyelashes, lost in thought. Fu Hang arrived at the film set at 7 in the evening. Xia Xiaofeng was already waiting there, but the crew was on high alert and ready to go. This wasn't the time for Fu Hang to chat about personal matters with his subordinate. He quickly got into work mode. Compared to Movie King's Life, the memoirs of a player girl co-authored by Little Xia and Brother Long clearly had to take a back seat in priority. Although Fu Hang had scheduled to shoot for tomorrow, he arrived early, and the crew, with all departments already prepared, quickly sprang into action. This was a major scene, comparable to the hospital explosion scene. After all, they had even brought in the P14.S. And on set, Fu Hang also met an old acquaintance, the king of soldiers, Jifeng. Jifeng was feeling bitter. After being discharged from the military, his superiors had arranged a very good civilian post for him. High position, good pay, or as the grunts would say, good money, little work, close to home. He was gleefully preparing to marry a wife and live out his years in peace. Who knew his first project would be to act as an action director for some film crew? Damn it, on his very first day, he got beaten up for no reason, completely bewildered. After returning, it took him a lot of effort to figure out what was going on with that crew, and then he started shirking responsibility, making excuses, and slacking off. Sending him to the battlefield was no problem. Even with a hole in his shoulder, he could still fight enemies with a dagger clenched in his teeth. But to be a shill on a film set, this screenwriter really couldn't do it. Fortunately, that beating wasn't for nothing. After being thrashed by a girl, no one urged him to go to the set to direct the action anymore. But these past few days, he couldn't hide, because that damn young master Fu, in order to shoot a movie, had actually brought in the P14.S. At a time like this civilian official couldn't shirk his duties or play dead. For public and private reasons, by sentiment and logic, he had to coordinate and supervise the entire process. Old G. Fu Hang was very enthusiastic and surprised to see Ji Feng. He strode forward and gave him a big hug. Ji Feng didn't speak, but returned Fu Hang's hug firmly. From the bottom of his heart, he was very grateful to Fu Hang. This was a life-saving favor. In the army, this was the kind of bond where you could entrust your wife and children to the other person. But this was also one of the reasons why Ji Feng hadn't dared to come back after finding out that Fu Hang was the behind-the-scenes boss of this entertainment company. The life-saving favor was real. But if the one who saved his life had also, in the process, taken all the credit for Ji Feng's own accomplishments, while Ji Feng himself had been promoted 5 ranks as a result, then Ji Feng truly felt too ashamed to face him. What are you doing here? Have your injuries healed? Fu Hang pulled back, studying Ji Feng carefully. Fu Hang was very excited. This was the sole witness to his own all-conquering moment. If he ever had a biography written, this guy would be an important interviewee. Well, I'm here to help. Ji Feng glanced awkwardly at the helicopters parked in the distance. Thanks. I didn't expect them to send you. So these are the P14.S. Fu Hang followed Ji Feng's gaze towards the 2 P14.S. Yes, although they're decommissioned, the P420. Ji Feng mechanically began to list the parameters of the 2 helicopters, knowing them like the back of his hand. Putting other things aside, his level of knowledge about military hardware truly befitted a king of soldiers. Come on, take me to see them. Fu Hang waved his hand grandly and led the way. Strangely, Xia Xiaofeng, Fang Tiandai, Director Liu, and the others who had been following him all stopped and didn't follow. Even more strangely, when Fu Hang approached these helicopters, which were heavily guarded by accompanying personnel and normally couldn't even be casually filmed, the staff members responsible for security merely glanced at Ji Feng and then silently stepped aside. Ji Feng, seemingly unconcerned about any impropriety in Fu Hang's actions, followed behind him with a complicated expression, diligently continuing his explanation. When Fu Hang nonchalantly pulled open the cockpit door and, with Ji Feng's help, settled into the pilot's seat, Director Liu and Heavenly King Liu in the distance exchanged an imperceptible glance, then lowered their heads in silence. This CEO, Fu, truly isn't an ordinary person. The king of soldiers, Ji Feng, is so respectful to him. Even if they were bought to be blown up, could an outsider just casually go up and inspect them? Although Ji Feng had been beaten up by Ying Yanin on set, which had somewhat diminished the king of soldiers' prestige in the eyes of the crew, Ji Feng's current position was undeniably real and significant. Holy cow, so many buttons. I don't recognize a single one. Sitting in the helicopter's cockpit, Fu Hang looked around curiously. You can't fly it? Ji Feng was taken aback. A drop of cold sweat trickled down Fu Hang's forehead. What kind of question is that? Why do you sound so surprised? Is it strange that I can't fly a military attack helicopter? But in Ji Feng's eyes, Fu Hang's glance was loaded with meaning. He got it. It was probably like that time Fu Hang claimed he'd never touched a gun. You say you don't know how to use a gun, yet you're more familiar with firearms than a special forces instructor, capable of taking down a fully equipped assault company with 2 Walther P99s. And you also claim to be in finance, a man of culture. But Ji Feng had watched the fight scene between Fu Hang and Ying Yanin these past few days. To the layman, it was just exciting, but an expert could see the real skill. Ji Feng saw at a glance that Fu Hang was completely leading Ying Yanin through the fight. Even her moves and counters were executed under Fu Hang's guidance. So, it wasn't that you couldn't fly it, but there were too many prying eyes around. After a brief moment of admiration, Fu Hang, still wanting more, jumped down. Seeing Ji Feng's enthusiasm, he thought Ji Feng might take him up for a spin, but Ji Feng had no such intention. However, Fu Hang wasn't clueless. With a crew of over 1,000 waiting for him to start filming, he naturally understood priorities. Besides, they were only going to blow up 1 helicopter. After filming, wouldn't there be 1 left? There would be plenty of chances later. An attack helicopter. What man could refuse that? If I posted this on social media. Cough cough. I'm getting carried away. Fu Hang returned to the crowd, and Ji Feng kept his distance. Boss, the storyboards are almost done. Your scenes are scheduled for tomorrow night. Please familiarize yourself with the script first. Director Liu hurried over and handed the revised storyboard script to Fu Hang. Fu Hang had actually studied this script many times, but to minimize errors, Director Liu conscientiously fulfilled his duties. It was a car chase scene. Joker flees by car, breaking through a blockade, while Raven pursues him on a motorcycle along a mountain road. The cooperation from the relevant authorities was truly impressive, making the crew once again feel the power of their mysterious boss. For this scene, the entire section of road, over 30 kilometers long, was closed off for filming. Although this provincial road didn't have much traffic due to the construction of highways and national roads, it was still a road closure, and for several days at that. These gentlemen are professional racers hired by the crew. They helped shoot many of the earlier scenes. Seeing Fu Hang was already in the zone, director Liu respectfully led him to a sand table, where several men with solemn expressions also stood. Amusingly, Ji Feng had also been invited over and was standing awkwardly to the side. Director Liu had specifically invited him because, during a casual chat, a colleague who came with Ji Feng had boasted to the director that this king of soldiers Ji had once intercepted an RPG with a car. Director Liu was astounded. Whenever he had free time these past few days, he would consult Ji Feng, hoping he could offer some valuable advice for the car chase scene. Fu Hang listened attentively as director Liu explained the scene, while the professional racers chimed in to clarify the vehicle's routes. Normally, for such dangerous scenes, actors wouldn't do it themselves. For example, even a superstar like Liu Tianwang would only film a few close-ups inside the car, with professional drivers handling the rest. But when it came to Fu Hang, he hadn't said anything, and director Liu didn't dare make the call himself, tacitly agreeing to Fu Hang's principle of not using a stunt double. His experience filming with Fu Hang recently had taught director Liu not to treat him as an ordinary actor. At this turn, two cars will converge. Because the curve is very narrow, maintaining speed will involve a certain degree of danger. Director Liu, holding a laser pointer, indicated a corner on the mountain road model on the sand table. What speed do we need to maintain? Fu Hang asked, staring intently at the corner. At least 80 mph. Any slower, and even if we speed it up in post-production with camera work, it'll still be lacking. Director Liu pondered for a moment, then turned to Fu Hang. The oncoming car will also be at that speed? Fu Hang pressed. Not necessarily. I'm responsible for the oncoming car. I'll slow down beforehand, taking the curve at about 35 miles per hour, so there should be enough distance between us, one of the racers beside him answered. I have no problem with that. Fu Hang glanced at him and nodded silently. This is a mountain road. It's different from doing 180 miles per hour on a highway. A cold, deep male voice spoke up beside them, low and tinged with an uncommon authority. The people around the sand table immediately looked towards the sound. Fu Hang, however, first saw a pair of expressive eyes, not fiery but very direct. What are you doing here? Didn't I tell you to rest well? A smile appeared on Fu Hang's face, and he instinctively took a couple of steps forward. Ing Yanin, no longer being so difficult, now seemed rather endearing to Fu Hang. This is a major scene. I came to observe and learn, Ing Yanin replied calmly, her gaze unwavering. You still need a rest. It'll help your wound heal. Fu Hang's eyes softened. Ahem. Beside Ing Yanin, that authoritative voice sounded again. Fu Hang frowned and looked at the unfamiliar middle-aged man. The man had a strong presence, completely out of place among the film crew. Was he a guest actor? It seemed this was the one who had just mocked his driving skills. Another one, trying to act important and make his presence known in front of me? Don't tell me you're also planning to take the grad school entrance exams? You're a bit over the age limit for that, aren't you? This is my father. He came along to see, Ing Yanin said suddenly, lowering her head and speaking softly. Fu Hang's eyes glazed over for a moment. His mouth fell open, and he was suddenly speechless. But it kind of made sense. He'd only met her mother yesterday, and her facial injury was, after all, a serious matter. Hello, uncle, Fu Hang greeted politely. But Olding didn't look pleased at all, merely glaring coldly at Fu Hang. Behind them, Director Liu and Liu Tianwang exchanged another glance, both seeing surprise in each other's eyes. What did Ing Yanin just say? Her father? This man? Director Liu and Liu Tianwang weren't clueless like Fu Hang, this supposed delivery guy and game booster. They kept up with the news. This man was a regular in the news, especially in reports from the casino city near Hong Kong, often making appearances. So, the assistant director hadn't just lucked into a potential boss's wife, who was an award-winning actress, but also a princeling? So, that's why the production had gotten the green light for everything, even managing to get a P14 deployed. By the way, sir, do you really approve of your daughter being in the entertainment industry? No, that's not right. Fu Hang and this man clearly didn't know each other. In Director Liu's mind, the relationships between these characters instantly became even more convoluted and mysterious. He silently elevated Ing Yanin's status another notch in his mind. He'd have to be extra careful in how he treated her from now on. This whole mess with her injury. It's not going to be pinned on me later, is it? You better take it easy. If you can't handle it, let the professionals do it. Racing on a mountain road like this is a completely different animal from speeding on a highway. Old Ying's tone remained cold. Now, seeing Fu Hang face to face, that suppressed fury in his heart twisted into an even more uncomfortable knot. No matter how he looked at this kid, he didn't seem like a good person. If not for the vivid memory of yesterday's secret talk, he would have been tempted to take off his shoe and smack him with it. Huh, scumbag. Fu Hang sullenly returned to the sand table. When he saw Ying Yanin, he'd actually been thinking of going up and hitting her with a combo. But with his father-in-law standing right there, it left him at a bit of a loss. Moreover, this rather intimidating-looking father-in-law probably knew a thing or two and was quite blunt with him, a complete contrast to yesterday's mother-in-law. Twice he'd been reminded about street racing. Did the old man know about his shady past? Ying Yanin, afraid of delaying the shoot, quietly pulled old Ying away. You're into street racing too? Lu Tianwang, however, sidled up to Fu Hang. There were reasons. Fu Hang pursed his lips. What kind of racing are we talking about? Director Lu also leaned in. From Shuncheng to Hansheng, it takes about. Fu Hang calmly stated a time. Several professional drivers exchanged bewildered glances. That was taking boasting too far. Covering that distance in that time would be tough, even on a dedicated racetrack, wouldn't it? All right, let's go check out the actual location. Fu Hang looked around. He was a man of action. The only way to know if it was possible was to try it. Naturally, no one objected, and they all piled into the crew's production van. However, when Fu Hang got out of the van at the filming location, his mouth twitched as he took in the sight of various sports cars neatly parked before him. Where did all these come from? Fu Hang turned to Director Lu. Don't tell me you bought them all. What a character. Truly a big-shot director. So good at spending money. Huh? This is all cashback I'm losing. Sponsored by car companies. Director Lu raised an eyebrow, his tone clearly seeking credit. Sponsored? Didn't we say no advertisers? Fu Hang's temper flared. Wei Yang Entertainment belonged to the top benefactor, so the investment in this project was also on her tab. And from the looks of it, the top benefactor's closed-door cultivation was almost over. She was at a critical 96. 67% progression. She might just break through to the golden core stage and condense a nascent soul the day she returned. With this kind of backdoor dealing, how much cashback am I losing out on? They're not advertisers. Director Lu was taken aback. This reaction wasn't what he'd expected. Did Tiandai find them? Fu Hang frowned. They approached us proactively. Originally, per Director Lu's instructions, I was going to buy the cars. But after this company heard my requirements, they offered to sponsor the vehicles for free, with no limits on models or quantity. Fong Tiandai, appearing from nowhere, objectively stated the course of events. What's the deal? Fu Hang was momentarily stunned and turned to look at Fong Tiandai. Knowing her, there had to be more to it. He had already broadened Fong Tiandai's horizons. She wouldn't be swayed by such a minor sponsorship. A chase scene, and all the sports cars are from the same brand? What's that about? I'm shooting a movie, not a damn car commercial. Free to use? Sounds nice, but did they pay an advertising fee? This scene needs a lot of sports cars. The Joker isn't alone. He has a team. On his escape route, his accomplices will also be driving various sports cars to draw fire. Fong Tiandai didn't answer, instead silently looking at a man standing near the sports cars. The man immediately understood and trotted over. Brother-in-law, my name is Qin Tianming. I'm in charge of this sponsorship. The man quickly took out a business card and offered it to Fu Hang. Fu Hang's mouth twitched. Brother-in-law, surnamed Qin. So, this car company belongs to the Qin family? Fu Hang coldly eyed the amiably smiling man before him and didn't take the offered card. The Qin family really knows how to seize every opportunity. Cars from other brands are parked over there. Fong Tiandai, seeming to understand Fu Hang's expression, quietly added. Fu Hang felt a little more at ease. Tiandai really was reliable. She got things done properly. I'll test drive a car first. Fu Hang glanced at the man still holding out the business card and walked towards the car that looked the flashiest. The Joker's flamboyant persona meant his car had to be flashy. Oh, right. Were those other cars paid for? After taking a few steps, Fu Hang suddenly remembered something and turned to ask Fong Tiandai. They're all sponsored. Fong Tiandai's voice suddenly trailed off weakly. Fu Hang froze on the spot. After other car companies heard the Qin family was sponsoring, none of them were willing to accept payment. Fong Tiandai said weakly. Fu Hang rolled his eyes, speechless. Is my influence really that significant now? One car company fighting tooth and nail to give money. You could say that's business acumen. eyeing the advertising effect. But when all car companies do it, it becomes rather thought-provoking. What they were offering weren't just run-of-the-mill cars. These were sports cars worth millions. And after the scene was shot, many of these cars would be wrecked. Fu Heng found it rather dull. That no more pretending phase from before didn't seem so rewarding anymore. Now, he couldn't even spend money if he wanted to. Besides, free things often end up being the most expensive. A street racing scene will definitely have car crashes. If we don't accept payment, we owe them a favor, which is the same as dealing with advertisers. How could they show realistic crash scenes then? To be even more precise, when they're racing, which car is in front? Which is behind? Are there performance differences? It's a huge hassle, okay? Fu Heng turned to look at Director Liu, but Director Liu met his gaze resolutely, his expression clearly stating, "I'm the director. Those aren't my concerns. That's for the producer to worry about." Fu Heng then looked at Fang Tiandai and saw the somewhat haggard woman with her head down, her face devoid of expression. But Fu Heng understood. She was preparing to be the bad guy to save the production money. Your horizons still haven't broadened enough. After driving a cool sports car up and down the mountain road, Fu Heng drove relatively conservatively, mainly to familiarize himself with the stretch of road. However, Fu Heng's first words after getting out of the car made Director Liu overjoyed. "Brother Long, please go back and bring the GT900. Director Liu had seen that GT900 before and was very fond of it. But it was Fu Heng's private car, so he didn't dare ask. And he had no way of obtaining such a globally limited edition model. President Fu's attitude towards filmmaking was indeed as dedicated as ever. One had to understand, once this GT900 appeared on screen as the Joker's car, it would most likely end up wrecked. Tiandai, contact the car companies and brand representatives and settle the bills. If they refuse to take the money, then have them pay the advertising fees. Fu Heng tilted his head and continued speaking to Fang Tiandai. In short, either they accept our payment, or they pay us. You want to take advantage of me and still expect me to owe you a favor. Fang Tiandai didn't hesitate for a moment, a hint of emotion flashing in her eyes. Most of the car companies behind these sports cars were joint ventures, and their domestic agents wouldn't have such advertising budgets. So, most of these companies paid out of their own pockets just to be part of this. In Fang Tiandai's understanding, they were doing it as a favor to her boss. Therefore, she firmly believed she should be the one to play the bad guy and take the blame for her boss. Who knew? Her boss would actually be so considerate of her, willing to forego these favors and even spend tens of millions instead. Fang Tiandai made a round of calls, and the responses from the various companies differed. Some were hesitant, some relieved, and some felt as if a great weight had been lifted, but they all chose to accept the payment. Again, they didn't have the corresponding advertising budgets. This whole sponsorship affair was actually quite complex. The Qin family started it, and a few car companies caught wind of something. After carefully inquiring about the production team situation, they were startled by the backing from certain relevant departments. Especially after Fu Heng's name surfaced, those with good connections jumped on board without a second thought. This move put the other companies in a difficult position. But the sports car circle is only so big. They might not know Fu Heng, but they knew each other. None of them were ones to act without seeing a clear benefit. So, they all gritted their teeth and followed suit. Only Qin Tianming, standing there on site, had a pained expression. The elders backing him had given very clear instructions when he came. Now, it seemed things weren't going according to plan. When Qin Tianming relayed the message back, a wistful look appeared on Qin Zhongyi's face. "It seems we'll still have to start with our boy. Have them quickly draw up the detailed cooperation plan with you and Trading." Qin Zhongyi mused silently for a long time before speaking to his wife. Ever since their boy had delivered that red envelope at noon, he'd had a vague premonition about how this would play out. Baldy Long's efficiency was, as always, impeccable. The GT900 soon appeared on set, and over with Fu Heng, the makeup artist had already finished his makeup. Director Liu had learned this lesson the hard way. In fact, the entire crew had. How many times had Fu Heng said he was just trying out a scene or doing a quick run-through, only to deliver a classic shot that was impossible to replicate or recreate? So, when Fu Heng suggested a full rehearsal, the entire crew, without waiting for Director Liu's orders, treated it as an official take. All camera units were in position, drones took to the sky. "One take," Fu Heng asked, sitting inside the GT900, looking at the camera fixed inside the car. "All departments, prepare." Director Liu's voice crackled through the walkie-talkie. Fu Heng tilted his head, his gaze falling on his own reflection in the rearview mirror, his eyes glinting faintly. Perhaps it was some kind of psychological suggestion, but whenever he wore this clown makeup, he always felt an irrepressible madness. This was probably what Director Liu was always talking about, getting into character. The GT900 slowly started, moving into the shot. And on the mountain road, the prepositioned prop vehicles also began to move slowly along their planned routes. Stop the car? Stop. However, the rehearsal had just begun. The GT900 hadn't even reached the designated filming section of the road when a loud shout came through the walkie-talkie. It was immediately followed by the sound of a collision and roaring engines. This sudden development made all the prop cars instinctively stop. An accident already, right at the start? What's going on? Director Liu frantically scanned the monitors, repeatedly asking. Someone's crashed the roadblock. An angry roar came from the walkie-talkie. Crashed the roadblock? Director Liu understood instantly and quickly switched to the rear-facing monitor. Sure enough, a black sedan appeared on the monitor, speeding along at an outrageous pace. An AE-86, it's a modified car. The engine and suspension have been altered. A professional driver next to Director Liu gave the assessment after just one glance. Street racers. Director Liu frowned, a look of surprise on his face. They had indeed chosen this stretch of road because its terrain was complex, similar to a mountain race circuit. It was rumored that many underground racers often held illegal races here. All vehicles pull over to the side. Safety first. Director Liu hesitated for only a second before issuing the command. The illegal street racing would naturally be handled by the relevant authorities. Since the road was closed for filming, there were definitely law enforcement personnel on site. The important thing now was to avoid any further incidents. These prop cars weren't cheap. Fu Hang, who had been about to pull over, frowned slightly, a hint of mockery flashing in his eyes. I spent so much money to close this road for filming, and you bastards come here to race? Do you have any idea how much this crew spends per minute? The GT900 didn't pull over. Instead, it slowly moved a little towards the middle of the road, straddling the line in a way that experienced drivers hated most. No other reason, just to piss the other guy off. In the rearview mirror, Fu Hang saw a pair of headlights rapidly approaching him from behind. Not slowing down, Fu Hang frowned slightly. Soon, the AE-86 behind him roared closer. Just as Fu Hang expected, even with him blocking the middle of the road, the other car showed no intention of slowing down. Fu Hang instinctively turned the wheel slightly, giving way a little. This kind of mountain road was usually 2 lanes. With the GT900 positioned in the middle, the passing space on either side was extremely tight. Fu Hang had initially intended to use this tactic to force the other car to stop, to see what kind of reckless fool would dare to show off here at a time like this. But the other driver didn't slow down at all, acting completely recklessly, so Fu Hang relented. At this spot, at this speed, if his actions caused the other car to plunge off the cliff, it wouldn't be worth it. As the 2 cars passed each other, Fu Hang frowned, watching the 86 brush past. Even though Fu Hang had yielded some space for the other car to forcibly overtake at that speed, the clearance was still extremely tight. Half a tire was practically on the hard shoulder as it went by, and the GT900 wobbled slightly, its side clearly scraped. Fu Hang's brow furrowed deeper instantly. It wasn't because he was upset about the GT900 getting scraped, but because in that fleeting moment of passing, he got a clear look at the people inside the other car. 2 men were in the front seats. Fu Hang was looking at them, and they turned to look at him too. One of them had a ferocious expression, his large mouth with yellowed teeth opening and closing in an exaggerated way. Baka? That was why Fu Hang was frowning. The speed was high. Both car windows were closed, and not to mention the AE-86, the GT900 soundproofing was excellent, so Fu Hang naturally couldn't hear what the other person was saying. But from the exaggerated shape of the other person's mouth, he actually managed to lip-read the word. Baka? Japanese? A cold glint flashed in Fu Hang's eyes. Whether they were or not, that curse word to Fu Hang was like an attack that bypassed all defenses. Boss, are you all right? Director Liu, having clearly seen the scrape on the monitor, asked anxiously. There's another vehicle behind them, the professional driver beside him pointed out at this moment. A motorcycle? Director Liu looked at the monitor and spotted a speeding motorcycle, also ignoring the blockade, crash through the already damaged guardrail. What the hell? Director Liu instinctively looked towards Assistant Director Brother Honam, who was in charge of personnel coordination. After spending some time together, he had finally figured out the background of Brother Honam and his group of extras. Logically, with these guys around, there shouldn't be anyone so blind as to cause trouble, right? Brother Honam had a fierce look on his face, and was repeatedly signaling with his eyes to a few of his men nearby. But Director Liu felt a tug on his sleeve. He turned around suspiciously and saw Heavenly King Liu motioning with his chin toward the monitor. Director Liu quickly looked at the monitor and was stunned to see that, on the road ahead of the motorcycle's path, a group of men in black had formed a line, standing imposingly in the middle of the road. Leading them was a massive bald head, and these men in black, each of them was holding a steel rebar. On a film set, with all the construction and maintenance of equipment, HRBF 500 rebar was never in short supply. Director Liu's mouth twitched. This really wasn't necessary. There were law enforcement officers on site. In this day and age, with surveillance cameras everywhere, these street racers wouldn't get away. He naturally recognized that bald head. It was the boss's personal assistant. Two motorcycles roared towards them. Baldy Long lowered the rebar in his hand, turned sideways, and began to find his angle, gathering strength. The boss was right. Easy days make people complacent. The brothers needed to keep their skills sharp. The boss is filming here, and some lowlife punks dare to show off and disrupt the shooting schedule. Baldy Long felt deeply ashamed. The group of men in black behind him, however, looked like they were starving for action, their eyes wide and bloodshot, a couple even sticking out their tongues. "We've been waiting for you." However, to their surprise, the two motorcycles screeched to a halt right in front of them. Due to the short braking distance, the bikes swerved precariously, nearly careening off the mountain road. Brother Long, one of the helmets was flipped open, revealing a surprised, mixed-race face. Mark, Baldy Long also recognized the face. That face. Putting aside other places, in Hansheng territory, everyone in the underworld knew him. Back in the day, this guy's net worth was over 10 million, and one of his legs alone was worth 5 million. The boss is here. Mark's gaze quickly swept over the familiar men in black, a flash of pleasant surprise in his eyes. "We're filming." Baldy Long, somewhat speechless, lowered the rebar, a hint of regret in his eyes. "What's the situation?" Fu Hang's voice crackled through the walkie-talkie on Baldy Long's person. As Fu Hang's personal assistant, Baldy Long was naturally authorized to have a walkie-talkie on set. "Boss, it's me, Mark. Ahead are the people we're chasing." Mark recognized the voice on the walkie-talkie and hurriedly interjected to answer. "Mark, the people you're chasing?" Fu Hang, inside the GT900, froze for a moment. "The people Mark was chasing? Weren't you guys chasing people abroad?" Mark's gaze darted around. He opened his mouth, but didn't know how to explain. He noticed the group of men in black, and also saw the crowd approaching in the distance, including uniformed personnel catching up from behind. Lately, they had achieved significant results abroad, making rapid progress. Especially with the secret help of Mr. Nian, everything had gone smoothly, and they had executed those traitors one by one. However, an accident occurred in Japan. The targets seemed to have received information in advance. They had failed. 2 of the 4 targets had escaped. After a long chase, they were stunned to discover that these 2 Japanese individuals had actually fled to China, heading towards Hansheng. What an utter humiliation. The crucial thing was if Mr. Nian found out they had failed, what would he think of them? Mr. Nian had made it explicitly clear. He didn't want useless people under him. When the group of men in black appeared blocking the road, Mark initially thought they were arranged by the enemy. He sneered inwardly. People like this think they can stop me? But then he saw that bald head. These were Mr. Nian's men. Had Mr. Nian found out? Japanese? Fu Hang's voice from the walkie-talkie was ice cold. Yes. Mark felt deeply ashamed. The GT900's engine roared, and the vehicle, which had been moving slowly, suddenly shot forward. "Boss!" Director Liu was completely bewildered. He'd heard the conversation on the walkie-talkie, but he was utterly clueless. The GT900's 0 to 100 acceleration was visually stunning. Through the in-car camera, he noticed Fu Hang's face, smeared with grease paint, displaying that familiar, brilliant, yet unsettling smile. "Ace Pilot, requesting permission to engage." Fu Hang's voice came through the walkie-talkie, filled with immense excitement and wild arrogance. "Get off." Baldy Long tucked the rebar into his waistband and reached out to grab Mark, intending to pull him off the bike. He'd heard Fu Hang's voice. As the boss's personal bodyguard and top henchman, how could he let the boss handle this personally at a time like this? Although he didn't know what grudge the boss had with those Japanese individuals, right now, it was just time to act. But to his surprise, his surefire grab was easily dodged by Mark, who was still on the motorcycle. "Let me drive. I'm a better rider." Mark's eyes flickered. He saw the malicious desire in Baldy Long's bloodthirsty gaze. This bastard is here to steal the credit. Baldy Long's expression stiffened, but time was tight, and there was no room for hesitation. He immediately hopped onto the back seat. Another quick-reacting man in black hooped and jumped onto the other motorcycle. The men in black cleared the way, and the two motorcycles roared off down the mountain road. A traffic policeman running up from behind, who was responsible for the roadblock, raised his hand to stop them, but was held back by his colleague. The colleague gravely took out his own walkie-talkie and quickly reported to his superiors. This colleague had sharp eyes. He had spotted the black handle protruding from Mark's waistband. This was why he had kept his distance and hadn't intervened. Traffic police on duty weren't armed with guns. The crowd of men in black didn't just stand there dumbly. Instead, they quickly ran towards the other vehicles reserved by the film crew. A chance for glory. They also didn't know who was running up ahead, but if Brother Long was this worked up, could the reward be small? The last time there was such a massive windfall, it was from that phony foreigner on the motorcycle just now. 5 million for one leg. Instantly, the mountain road thundered with roaring engines as vehicles of all kinds sped recklessly. Are all the cameras rolling? Director Liu quietly put down his walkie-talkie and whispered to his assistant beside him. He didn't know why, but whenever Fu Hang was around, he wasn't surprised by accidents on set at all. Instead, he felt a faint sense of anticipation. The assistant nodded vigorously, his eyes also gleaming with excitement. Their gazes all subconsciously fixed on the camera inside Fu Hang's car. On screen, Fu Hang's expression was slightly ferocious, the multicolored grease paint reflecting a dazzling, cool light. The Joker. Fu Hang was getting hype. Who was Mark chasing? A moment's thought, and Fu Hang figured out. And a fiery spirit from his humble roots, once he confirmed that those fleeing ahead were Japanese, became completely irrepressible. The last time he'd felt this way was when facing those SEALs in the Golden Triangle. It was still the same saying, "Our country, our people, are peace-loving, but I am not." There was a saying circulating online, while other countries protested against excessive national military spending. Over in China, people were clamoring that not enough gunpowder was being burned. Of course, there were disagreements among the populace too, divided into hawks and doves. The hawks criticized the doves for not being aggressive enough, while the doves grumbled that the hawks were actually too cautious. If China opened a military fund top-up page, it would probably be maxed out in minutes by die-hard geeks and disgruntled youths. That professor from a National Defense University had also told the media, "The refined, scholarly image I've painstakingly cultivated isn't to show weakness externally, but to pacify domestic sentiments, to calm the hot-blooded youth and urge them to remain level-headed." If even ordinary Joes felt this way, what about a system-blessed devotee like Fu Hang, who constantly dreamed of achieving peace for all? Fu Hang was completely fired up. The GT900's performance was finally, truly unleashed. The last time he'd raced the GT900, Yu Chu had been beside him, and Fu Hang had been restrained. But now, a special BGM started playing in Fu Hang's mind. Broadswords chop. Chop towards the heads of the devils. What's going on? Old Ing, who had been closely watching the scene, looked completely suspicious and pulled an unremarkable props team member to the side. The crew member had just hung up the phone. Faced with Old Ying's questioning, a hint of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Old Ing glared, a vein throbbing on his forehead. The ones on the motorcycles are those ghost shadows. The ones who passed earlier are from Japan. The crew member paused briefly, glanced at Ji Feng standing beside Old Ing, and answered in a low voice. The situation was urgent. Manpower here was limited, and the two people before him were undoubtedly the best candidates to quickly mobilize and coordinate personnel. Old Ying's expression changed from stunned to astonished to horrified in just 2 seconds. Ji Feng, you're a good driver. Take some men and go after them immediately. Old Ying quickly made his decision and also took out his phone. What kind of constitution does this kid have? A pioneer of military merit? Born with a physique destined for military glory? A passive skill? Villain taunt? I don't commit crimes. I'm just a transporter of criminals. I just came with my daughter to see something new and to get a look at that damn kid myself, and I still run into something like this?